Does anybody have anything new they've watched?
Dude, it's been like 4 weeks.
Like,
I've watched everything
that's on. Yeah.
I mean,
Like, fucking everything. I don't even know where to begin and what to leave out. All right, welcome to the All Pop No Culture podcast. My name is David, and someone actually let me be in charge today. This week, I am joined by only a couple of our regulars. I've got Kevin.
Hola.
We've got Peter.
Ba weep grana weep ninibon.
And Peter brought a friend along. He brought his friend Jared.
Batu Barada Nikto.
All right, it's getting real weird all of a sudden. So we're going to try and change things up a little bit this week.
Opie just turned it off.
Oh, yeah. That's fine. We're not his demographic, or he's not our demographic anyway. Yeah, we're going to change things up a little bit, change the order on a couple of things. We're probably going to do away with the franchises in the future. But I did want to get out of the way.
Before you
go,
so no, it's the gaping holes. Opie and Alex are taking a short hiatus, indeterminate amount of time, and we have chosen to sally forth without them. They will be back. That's all.
All right.
Just
thank you so much.
It's what I'm here
Public
for.
service announcement from producer Peter. So,
just in case you're all wondering, they're not gone forever. Just.
After hearing that, they might be.
I know.
He doesn't want their dedicated fans to leave the fan base.
That's right. But they'll definitely be back sometime, maybe never.
That's what I'm saying. They come for Opie, they stay for Pete. It's kind of.
I don't think that's true.
Wait, so is that like a Mary Boff kill thing? How does that work exactly?
I don't know.
Okay.
So anyway, back on the rails.
Moving back in a straight direction. All right, so I will do my Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull. We'll follow it up with the What We Watched, hopefully a little more abbreviated version of What We Watched, and then we'll discuss some of the regular things. Marvel movie, new one came out, so we've got Shang Chi to talk about, and Ted Lasso, and then finally we're going to introduce a new bit, and this week, we're going to actually have a director's spotlight, and we've chosen, or I guess I've chosen, Stanley Kubrick. Always been a huge fan of Stanley Kubrick, and his stuff is generally considered to be good. So everyone chose a Kubrick film, and in the second half of the show, we will be discussing our Kubrick film and Kubrick as a whole. So there we go. Anyone else have anything to add?
No, sounds good. Let's get right into that.
Buckle up.
The Crystal Skull?
Yes.
I'm going to go brief on the Crystal Skull, mostly because it's been so stinking long. We have a prime example of the film right here behind me for those who can see on the viewing audience of one. It's basically... Oh man, it's so bright and so overlit, and the background is so clearly computer generated. This movie was
literally
made.
Described the entire movie. We could stop the discussion right there.
Yeah, it's clear that Lucas talked Spielberg into doing the Star Wars prequels version of Indiana Jones. It's like all digital. There's not as much practical.
Nope.
It looks like crap. And so you get this whole travesty of an opening in
the
which
first
somehow
5 minutes of Aquaman for 2 hours.
The whole beginning starts off with, I don't know, like 80 Russians somehow magically take over an entire military base.
Which
how 80 Russians got
Yeah.
all of this military equipment in the middle of the United States.
With the 2 inept guards at the gate. I mean, they went full trope, like full trope.
So, like, you're just like, oh my God. And so he gets all the way through all of the terribleness that is, like, finding it with gunpowder he throws in the air, and it, like, turns into, like, a a mist that practically points a fucking arrow right at the damn thing. And the thing attracts everything except for people's guns, which magically it doesn't have any effect on in any way, shape, or form, which makes no sense. Anyways, I don't even remember how he gets out of that, and he ends up
Isn't it the refrigerator?
Well, no, not there yet. He ends up in
blast at the
what amounts to Nuketown. If you ever played Call of Duty, it's pretty much just the recreated 50s set that they blow up at the end, and he survives by climbing into an old-timey refrigerator. And magically, it blows him like three quarters of the state of Nevada away.
So
and he's tumbling the whole time, but he pops out just fine.
We'll just suspend the laws of physics for that whole sequence.
Yeah, so after that, he gets back, and you get some more traditional Indiana Jones stuff. And the next, 45 minutes of the movie is actually really quite enjoyable. It's fun, and it's old school Indiana Jones. It's all practical stuff. They do the map with the plane moving and the red dots, and it feels all correct. And they introduce his son, which you don't find out till much, much later in the film is his son, but that right away is
instantly.
His son.
Yeah. Fucking
Yeah, so you introduce the character of Mutt, and it's actually, their relationship working kind of okay. It's a little forced, but it's also an Indiana Jones film, so that's pretty much most of the relationship.
It's also Shia LaBeouf trying to relate to Harrison Ford.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a...
Well, we can just blame the casting director for that.
Well, Shia LaBeouf was super up and coming at the time. Everyone thought he was going to be the next Harrison Ford.
Yeah.
And so... until he just proved himself to be a little unstable, and
just a little.
So but
I actually liked him as an actor, especially around that time.
I did too. And when you watch the film, it's not too his performance is not bad till you get to when it's really bad.
He wasn't bad in Holes.
Yeah,
he's fine in Holes.
That's the movie that kind of made him.
He's come 12. Back a bit with Honey Boy and what was it? Peanut butter
Falcon.
Falcon, thank you.
Yeah,
which are both quality films. I mean,
he's trying to make it
right. I'm not terribly fond of him, but those are two objectively good movies, and he is good in them.
I don't think the studios want to touch him, though. I think he's having to do these independents that he's producing himself and directing and whatnot, because he's proven to be. They probably can't insure him. That's probably one of the things. I mean,
your blood is cocaine and psilocybin, Shiba. We just can't. It's
So instead of Nazis, they upgrade to communists in this one.
They upgrade.
And, so it's just it's the standard Indiana Jones shit, and then it gets to this fight or drive chase sequence in the jungle that is just.
So bad.
The greatest chase scene ever filmed.
Biggest crime against cinema that I can think of in most recent.
That also happens in there's part of that happens in a warehouse, right?
The warehouse shit is the beginning of the film.
Oh God! See, but just both of those, the jungle and the warehouse, they're so interchangeable.
Like I said, the warehouse in the beginning.
The jungle. Aren't they kind of concurrent scenes almost? Because isn't it the Russians take the Ark they take the skull out of the museum where the Ark is supposed to be? Because there's that shot where one of the boxes is broken open. You see a corner of the Ark, so they're like, "Remember, old school fans, we're still the same thing." But then isn't it not long after that they're in the jungle and then trying to get?
No, it's 45 minutes later after that scene. Because the opening scene is in the warehouse, and then he gets away, and they've got it, and he has to catch up. But this is like any other Indiana Jones thing where he gets it, but then they get it back, and then he gets it, and then they get it back, and then this guy's a double agent, and he works for the CIA, and now he's back working for the Russians, and he's a triple agent, and it's back and forth. It's like a bad Bond film in places throughout the film. He's got his buddy Gus, who is the one who keeps bouncing back and forth whether he can be trustworthy or not. He's not. Newsflash.
Yeah.
So the jungle part is, it's pretty far in, and it's just terrible because at that point they've picked up the character from the first film. I'm blanking on her name.
Marion.
I don't have my notes.
Marion.
Yeah, Marion. Marion is, of course, the mother of Mutt and the love of Indiana Jones's life. So now she's along for the ride. She does the driving of the vehicle that they stole for most of the fight scenes. But there's sword fights between vehicles that are stretching close and back, and they've got their legs one on each thing. They're doing the splits as they get further apart. Shia LaBeouf takes to the trees and becomes Monkey Lord, and somehow is able to swing through the trees, charm all the monkeys, and catch up to a speeding Jeep fight and get ahead of them, and then ambush them all with the monkeys. It makes no sense.
Yo, because he's Goku, son.
Yeah.
That's what's going to happen. He's going to try and cast himself in some Dragon Ball Z shit. And he's
Look,
like, look,
he's
look what I can do.
He's got some of that Tarzan DNA.
Yeah.
That was the surprise plot point of the movie.
It was terrible. That whole scene is just awful. And then they get to the temple and they break in, and it's pretty good again for a little while until they decide to go full alien spaceship. And that whole scene is terrible. It just, there's nothing good. Of course, my dog's going to bark now.
No, yeah. The problem I had with that scene the most wasn't even what they tried to do with the alien spaceship. It wasn't even that that's what it was. It was just that it was so poorly done.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
dude, it's just a classic saucer. Yeah. And the thing is that it shows up, it spins for like 4 seconds, and then it drops into another dimension through it. It pops away. And you're like, why did you need to show it then? Why didn't it just pop away and then the whole mountain collapses and then you get the explanation, oh, they were interdimensional aliens, not extraplanetary aliens. But for it to actually be a fucking flying saucer to travel through dimensions, what the fuck?
Well, I do remember thinking when I saw this, because I've only ever seen this I think once.
This was my second time. I'd only ever seen it
once. I've only almost walked out of the theater one time, and it was this movie. But both Christy and I hit that point where we were pot committed, and we were just like, well, if this is going to be this bad, then we're just going to stay and just talk shit about this movie at this point, and that's what we did. And I do remember thinking though that the saucer, it was such a poor attempt at going, oh look, it's the 40s 50s, everybody sees this is the flying saucer that they all saw. This is where flying saucers came from. And it was like, bruh, I don't I'm not expecting the Sulaco to interdimensionally jump through space time, but a glowing sphere, maybe let's roll with that. Yeah. It was just bad. It was very Plan 9. That's what it looked like to me. I was watching it. It was I know that's CGI, but I swear to God, there's a fucking string right there. So it's just so annoying.
It's bad. I do have, it's in my garage. I put it away because we kept not recording the box, and it says the complete edition of Indiana Jones, and it's the DVD set before Crystal Skull had been released. So I was going to show that as my evidence that there were in fact really only 3. It said complete on the box.
That is fact. The 4th Indiana Jones film, first of all, it's the perfect example of some franchises shouldn't exist forever. There are some things that are so good, you should just accept that you made a ton of money of it, accept that they're all beloved, and then just let it lie. There are some things that you really just don't have to mess with anymore. And now they're going even further and making another one, which worries me greatly.
He's going to be in a fucking walker. I can't, it's going to be all
he hurt himself 70, the first week on set.
Yeah. I think he's 78 or 79 now.
Well, but that's the thing though, even with CGI, even with stand-in body doubles, you're still going to get a ton of shit like you got in the fucking Bond films that Kevin and I had to watch, whereas you got towards the end, as they were older, a lot of the stuff's shot from a lot farther away than it used to be.
Yep.
And so I think we're going to get a lot of that, because you can only do so much with CGI.
It looked like he could barely move in The Force Awakens, which is why I didn't have a problem with them knocking him off, because you're like, oh man, that dude can't do the role no more. That's fine, kill him.
Yeah.
And I'd rather have a dead Han Solo than a different Han Solo. So I was totally okay with it. And then when I saw that they were making a new Indiana Jones, I was like, dear God, he's not even good enough to play Han Solo. How's he going to play Indiana fucking Jones?
And now that they're still not talking about killing the franchise. They're talking about
this is the torch
transferring the franchise,
Right.
And potentially to Phoebe Waller-Bridge.
Who is that?
I
know the name.
Fleabag.
Okay, yeah. No, it's like I knew the name, I just couldn't.
She was the voice of the robot in Solo.
Yeah.
Also.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I
like her. I just don't know what.
I don't know. The whole thing will just forever boggle my mind. I feel like they should have just stopped with 3. It's very rare that you get a franchise, or at least even a trilogy, where the third movie is, you could argue, is the best of the 3. Like, it's, the second one is what it is, and you either love it or hate it, and people like it. But
honestly, it's not that bad. It's just not as good as the other 2.
Exactly. And it's still, the second one still always had that like Tales of the Golden Monkey vibe that like you got all that adventuring kind of crap that that you want out of it.
It gets liked because it's like Empire, in that it's a darker themed, much more serious film, and the other 2 are much more kind of serialized, almost comic booky. In the way, you can have the whole mine crate. The word is escaping me, but they're in the mines, and the whole thing's done like with stop motion photography. And
the mine cart thing.
The mine cart, thank you.
Yeah.
So that whole thing is kind of comic booky, but it's just a really darker themed movie, and generally I think, if I remember correctly, it's that way because one or both of them were going through divorces, and they were like, let's just make a movie that's kind of like fuck the world kind of vibe. Because that's where they were.
I did not know that, and so the imagery now of the heart getting pulled out and just standing there beating in his hand makes a little more sense.
Makes a lot more sense.
That's
right.
Okay.
But I think we can all agree that the 3 films, if you take them and cut the 4th one, they stand alone as
it's a great trilogy.
3 solid movies. That you can sit and watch. And then somebody will say, "Are we going to watch the 4th one?" And you go,
"No."
No, you can do that alone at home.
Yeah, you don't need
and this film is still made by Steven Spielberg. Like, this wasn't made by somebody else. This is
some
Steven
other idiot
Spielberg's turd.
What do we know? What year was that released offhand? Do you know?
I do not off the top of my head. That's
probably it's within the last 10 years.
No,
I don't know. I think it's older than that. Yeah, it's older than that.
Yeah, because it was before.
It's got to be like 2005, 2006.
No, because I was with my wife when it came out, so it's at least the last 2008 years, but
2008
to 13 years.
Okay. Yeah, so think about that. He was like 65 when they made that, and he's going to be like 78 or 79 or even 80 by the time the fifth one comes out.
He is clearly old in this 4th one. I mean, it's no question that he is old.
Well, it had been, 21 years, right? Because didn't Last Crusade come out in like 87?
I want to say it was 89, but I'm not 100% on that.
Well, it has to be, like, canonically in the movies, has to be, around 20 years after the first movie.
89.
Because Mutt is...
89, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
All right.
But now that you haven't said it's the worst movie ever made, I kind of want to watch it again.
It's not the worst movie ever made. It's definitely not. There's some really good stuff in the middle, but the end, beginning, and that car chase scene are terrible.
And that's the scary part about
Yeah.
that. I have completely blocked out that there was anything good in that movie. I don't remember anything
there is,
in there.
I think
remember
it's totally
the 2 car
overshadowed.
chases, the whole I remember all the crap. I don't remember that there was anything good. But that's the thing. I don't that's why Jared. I thought the same thing. I always thought that there was like the car chase through the warehouse went butted up right into the jungle. That's, and I think it's because I was so disgusted with the beginning. That I just kind of zoned out for 45 minutes, and I was like, "Oh, they're back in a car, monkeys."
Yeah, there's literally 45 minutes between those 2 scenes, and you get stuff kind of that's reminiscent of the library scene in Last Crusade.
Oh, cool!
Where they're in a book area working shit out and finding clues that lead to other things. So you get that's what that whole 45 minutes is kind of really the fun piecing together of the puzzle. Then once they get there, that's when they have to then compete with the communists. Oh, the dreaded communists. We're back talking about this thing, though, and we really should have moved on. So I've been talking for a while. Who wants to talk about what they watched? We'll go with Pete.
All right, I'll jump in with that. So I am super duper excited that Wu-Tang: An American Saga is now back. Wu Wednesdays.
The whitest guy in America.
Dude, it's... So, even if you're not a Wu-Tang Clan fan, even if you have a minor attachment to 90s hip-hop, it's a really well done show. If you are a Wu-Tang fan, you watch all of these characters unfold, and they are dead on to the rapper. There's a rapper, a guy named Dave East, who's playing Method Man, and it is friggin' Method Man. It's ridiculous, but it's just very, very well done, and a little pissed off because it was kind of overlooked at the Emmys completely. And if you watch it, it's just real quality. Is the thing. It's scripted well. It's put together well. It's hour long. We're 5 episodes in. I think there's probably going to be 13. You got the first season, which is in a lot of ways almost like a Wire story. With the early phases of Wu-Tang coming together and what it was, and now in the second season, the group is actually coming together to start the recording empire that brought Shaolin out to the world, and it's definitely worth a watch.
I don't know what any of your words mean right now. After you said Method Man, I started. I didn't I know who Method Man is. And then it was.
I will admit, I probably like it a lot more than the average person because I've been a Wu-Tang fan. So to see this stuff come together, you go in and they've just rented in the last episode. They rented an apartment that they've turned into a recording studio, and so they're on their way to recording. What becomes the 32 Chambers, and so he steps into the recording booth and starts going, and he starts doing the song Method Man from the first album, and it's ridiculously spot on. The guy that plays Old Dirty Bastard is insanely Old Dirty Bastard. The main character who plays RZA, Bobby, is just he's got his speech pattern down perfectly, dog. The way he talks, and it's just you're like, oh shit, that is the RZA. So if you're into that, it's definitely worth a watch. Even if you're not, try and watch a couple episodes because aside from the Wu-Tang aspect of it, it's also just a pretty good crime drama, especially that first season with everything that goes on between the Park Hill and Stapleton projects in Staten Island, New York. Other one that I watched that was pretty good, better than I expected it to be, was Ordinary Joe. This is an NBC. It's also on whatchamacallit, so it's on Peacock and a couple other places. It follows a guy from the day he's graduating college, and he, through the first 5 minutes, you realize he's got 3 choices he can make. He can go off and have dinner with his parents and his family. He can go down to the shore with this girl that he's been friends with for the longest time, but they've never hooked up together, or he can go off and hang out with this girl and her friends that he just met there. He ran into at the at graduation. They, just didn't know each other. And his goal is to be the next Billy Joel. So what they do is they take it and they take all three paths
Sliding
that you could
doors.
take,
Yeah.
but not. Yes, but not. It's close to sliding doors. It's very close. It's the same kind of way they put it together, but unlike in sliding doors where there's not a lot of parallels between her life, the two lives when she goes, it still maintains the exact same things that are like the pertinent points. So like spoilers. So he follows the girl that he just met that day, right? She winds up going. She encourages his music career, and so he winds up going and becoming like a famous singer. And she works for a congressperson, but they can't have kids. And his best friend is still in his life, so the players are all still there. Now the blonde who he was like his best friend, he runs into her at the high school reunion. Or the college reunion, and she has a kid with like cerebral palsy. Okay, cut back. So now he's followed the blonde girl. He went and talked to her. Well, what she told him was one of the times they fooled around, she's pregnant with his child. So then that path that he's on where he follows her, she's a paralegal where she was going to go to law school. He's a nurse instead of being a singer or being a cop like his dad is. And his best friend is married to this girl that he met at graduation that day. But they still got the kid, and he and the blonde girl are divorcing. And so that plot line is going to focus on kind of like the two of them coming back together. Then cut over to the next one where he follows his family. He becomes a cop, like his dad and his uncle and so on and so forth. Goes to the reunion, sees the blonde lady. Again, she doesn't tell him that she had a kid. He meets the kid and he's like, oh yeah, but it's still his. Like it happens in all three realities. So it's like, when he's in the Rockstar reality, he doesn't know that she was pregnant and had the kid until she tells him at the but she gave it up for adoption at the reunion. So now his focus on that one in the Rockstar one is that he's going to try and find this kid that she gave up for adoption. So it's starting off interesting, and it's done well because they're not the way they're cutting between each different storyline. It's done slickly. Like it's not like a lot of pan wipes and clunky little, oh look, we're back from commercial. Like they do some decent stuff with like characters turn around a corner, and as they walk around the corner, all of a sudden you're into another storyline where you're picking up two other characters doing something else from a different place. And so it doesn't feel like that stale, but the acting isn't super quality yet. Then again, it's a pilot. So I'm going to give it the 3-episode treatment and see if it's worth anything. And, if after 3, fuck it, goodbye. I feel like there's a couple of these that like I want to try watching because everybody raves about This Is Us, and I have not watched a single episode of that show. And it seems like something that's supposed to be like right up my alley. And then, so the last thing I watched that was kind of new was the reboot of The Wonder Years.
See, I can't do that because it's not a reboot of the Wonder Years.
You're right. It's not.
So,
but it is
that show. Like I refuse to watch it because it pisses me off. They're just using the name The Wonder Years as a marketing tool.
Yes. See, I'm actually completely with Kevin on this one. I think this show is a great premise. But what they are doing is riding the coattails of a show that's beloved to people who were 12 or 13 years old in the late 80s. Yeah. Whose parents watched that show with them. The Wonder Years is phenomenal. I think everyone I know still has a crush on, what's her name? Danica McKellar. So, but it pisses me off, I think in the same way that Kevin's saying, that they were like, hey, you guys have this great idea for a show. We totally love it, but let's call it The Wonder Years. And I'm sure whoever wrote it was like, because you guys just want to make money on rehashing an IP that you own already, and the producers were like, "Yes, exactly."
So is it shot in the same style as the original?
Yes and no. Yes and no. It's I mean it's they're not
60s,
trying to
right?
but it's in the 60s again.
Yeah.
But they're not trying to make it look like it was like that almost that 60s grainy footage and lighting the way they did that. Like they didn't bother doing that, which I actually appreciated. Because they didn't if they had done that, then I would have felt like they were trying to trade on it a little too much. They are trading on the name in a lot of ways. But it is the exact same format. You've got, it's the view from the kid. He's got the parents. He's got a sister. He's got a brother who's away in Vietnam. The voiceover, Don Cheadle does a great job.
That's the thing. That's the thing for me, though, is that I know everybody in it is good. Like, I love Dule Hill.
He is fucking
Yeah,
amazing, dude.
Yeah.
Oh, I have no doubt about that. And they just should have called it something else. Like, it just makes me so mad.
I agree.
Because it's
the spirit of the original Wonder Years it's still there. Like, it's still like, I can't exactly explain it, but in watching it, it wasn't as same as like when I was watching the Wonder Years as a fucking 12-year-old. But I still felt that vibe from it. But they are leaning into the comedy a lot more than the original show did. It is definitely, I would say it's more of a comedy with dramatic elements as opposed to a drama with some comedic elements.
So it sits in the middle of the Wonder Years and the Goldbergs.
Kinda, yeah. But exactly, but it's not. Yeah, it's just not as over the top as the Goldbergs. Exactly. That's actually a really good point. That's a perfect way to describe it. Because there were a couple of things like that I was like, eh. But it's also got one of the characters they introduced is also on that show that I was watching, Heels, on Showtime or Stars. Which, if you like Dave, you were saying David, you were saying that like you guys wait and do that for Outlander. For this routine, watch Heels. It keeps getting better every week.
Nice. All right.
It really is. That's one that if you get a chance to watch it, definitely. Well, just like Black Sails, like find the time to sit down and watch them. But yeah, I definitely I like this Wonder Years one. I don't know how long it's gonna last because it is. I do agree. It is very much trading on the nostalgia, and you can feel it. But there,
I don't have a problem with that. It's just if they're not the same characters, then why would you give it the same name? At least call it the Wonder Years West Side or something. Like something that differentiates.
Wonder Years Black folks.
Or use something that was part of the vernacular of the time period for like Black America.
Yeah,
the groovy years. The dig-in years, the whatever, but to just say we own this thing, and so we're going to name it that because everyone who's 45 to 75 is going to go, oh, they made another Wonder Years. Oh, we have to watch this. That's the problem.
And to me, it's like they need the name because they don't believe in the product. Like you give it that name so that you can market it under that. Whereas if you had just put it out under another name and let it live on its own, it would have been fine.
I get what you're saying. I think that part of that is also still in the reality that this show being a show about a black family in the 60s in America, even with that cast, I think without calling it the Wonder Years, it wouldn't have hit networks. It would have been BET. Which is, there's actually a lot of really good programming on BET, but it doesn't at all appeal to, mainstream flyover state white America. Whereas this actually, I think,
I don't know, because what is it? Is it Blackish? I can't remember the name of the show. But that does well. And there's been other, major broadcast stuff with predominantly black cast that's had good runs. In
Blackish works because it's a total comedy, and I like it. I think it's really good. I'm hooked already from the first episode. Okay. There's a couple things. I just don't think it. Blackish was also unique. Anthony Anderson is just fucking hilarious in that. This is good. I don't know how long it's gonna last though, because it's. Again, it's tough because you have the Wonder Years, and even if you take it and put it through a black prism, it's still the story of a 12-year-old boy growing up and young love and doing
All
stupid
those
things in the
that are
neighborhood.
Universal and relatable.
Yeah, which is cool, and I love to see that. But we already saw it with the Wonder Years.
And like I said, I mean, it's more comedic, but the Goldbergs was a successful like follow up to the Wonder Years for me. You had the narrator; it was from his view. He had the brother, he had the sister, he had it was the same thing basically. It was just a comedy. It was just a full on comedy.
Speaking of the Goldbergs, even with the season premiere, it was pretty good. It was a nice little tribute to
to Pops.
It was good, but that show is nearing its end.
Yeah, it probably should have sunset.
Season, I couldn't get through it. That show has been needed to be put out the past years.
It's been it's really hit that like shark jump point.
Well, and it's hard if you make a show that's predominantly like led by the kid, you can't outgrow his childhood. What I mean? Like it's just doesn't work anymore.
And I know it's based on Adam Goldberg's real life in some ways. I'm sorry, there's no way a senior in high school in the 80s, even as geeky and as nerdy as he is doing some of the shit that this kid was doing. Like that they try and pass off. And I know it's, hyperbole for the TV and everything else, but you're just like, no, dude. I'm sorry. You weren't dressing up like Bill and Ted to do a remake of Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure with your grandfather.
Yeah.
Like it just.
So I guess that is so. I haven't watched it, but I know there's that show that's like the spinoff from Big Bang Theory, Young Sheldon. So that show is obviously based on the kid. So would you say that show then its lifespan is lessened because you can't like you said, Kevin, you can't outpace the kid growing up. Like you have to focus on that, and at some point it's not Young Sheldon anymore.
I think so. I mean, I would think because he on the show is what, like 10 or 11. I haven't watched it, so I don't know for sure.
That's probably a good guess.
See that in theory though, with that being based on the thing, that show actually has a really long lifespan because if he's only 10 or 11, and you're talking about Sheldon Cooper, and then he's going to college young and everything else, just with everything he's doing, you've got like years.
The problem with it though, with him going as soon as he has to leave home, you lose most of the characters from that original show.
Which is what you and Alex beat into my head is the best part of that show is the ensemble cast.
Yeah. So that's the trick, right? Is that when you have that, as soon as you have to start taking people away for whatever reason, you start to lose what the show is. Yeah. And sometimes you can redefine it. I mean, sometimes shows are okay with that, but it gets really, really difficult to keep making a good show.
That's what they did with Grey's Anatomy, and it's worked out phenomenally well.
All right,
I've not watched a single episode of that show,
Grey's Anatomy. So we're gonna retire Peter.
It's a show that's been on for almost 2 decades. It's time to move on.
I will say I haven't watched Grey's Anatomy in like 15 years.
I haven't watched a single episode, not one.
Manliest thing you've said tonight.
I know the first. Actually, no, the first couple of seasons of that show were not that bad. Anyway, go on. Moving on.
Jared goes. All right, so we'll have Jared go, and he's going to talk to us about stuff we definitely haven't discussed before. So.
Okay, so the 3 things that I've watched recently. So I'll go in reverse order, actually. There's a show on BBC, or a series, as the English like to call them, called Vigil. It's got Saran Jones in it, who plays a DCI, which is basically like what we would just call a police inspector. Mostly takes place on a submarine that's on patrol, starts suffering some issues. There's been a murder on board because it's Her Majesty's submarine, so it's patrolling off the coast of I think that's where it is. But anyways, so there's a murder that happens. She's got a background where there's been a trauma in her life where it had to do with a car getting run off the road and, of course, starting to sink in some water. So, of course, she gets sent to a submarine, which for the added drama aspect. And then you start getting into all this stuff, as the show progresses. It gets into all the stuff about there's a little bit of political intrigue because, like, MI5 gets involved because, there might be the possibility of sabotage, and they think it could be either the Chinese or the Russians. So you get like the Admiralty involved, and then you get like the minister. It's always it's like Indiana Jones. It's the Russians or the Chinese. So anyway, so 5 episodes have gone by. The 6th, I think, is airing on the 26th. So is that today or tomorrow? I think.
It's today.
It's today for you.
Today for me. So yeah, so it's almost over. I don't know if this is like a one-off or if they're going to continue these characters into another series, but it's pretty good. And I will say one of the things, because as I said to you guys earlier, that I've been watching a lot of sort of foreign episodic stuff and not really American stuff lately, is that everything, if you watch like a procedural cop show in the United States, it's always like a car chase. We're running down a hallway with guns drawn and we're shooting stuff and we're like beating somebody up. Everything from across the pond is totally different. They're much more focused. I mean, they do carry guns, and every once in a while they'll pull a weapon or unholster a weapon. You usually don't see many people getting shot, but it's much more about the actual procedure of the work. Mm-hmm. And that's where the focus of the insight is. And so I just, after watching American TV for 3.5 decades, or 4 decades, I'm so tired of it. It's the same. I mean, there's like 9 different CSIs or 7 different Law and Orders, and they're all the same show. They're all the same show. Every character archetype is exactly the same, like without fail, just over and over and over again. It's just like processed American cheese food.
So one of our big family things that we watch, for some reason, I don't know how we all got hooked into it. We watch all of the Chicago stuff by Dick Wolf. No. Chicago Med, Chicago PD, and Chicago Fire.
Intervention. So,
oh no, they are bad. Like it's just one of those night we can watch it with the kids. We can have it on. We all, it's a fun little story. But they are so bad, and they are exactly like you said. Like they are so hyper predictable.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Or the one that drives me crazy that I see commercials for that I still haven't watched either, so I'm probably not the best critic, is 911.
Won't
like they've had like
hurricanes,
like a
tidal
huge
waves.
Earthquake. Yeah, like they have like ended the Earth like 3 times on that show.
So it's like a TV version of the movie 2012.
Yeah,
basically, like it's nuts.
Keep doing over and over.
It's like you'd like to see a day in the like a normal day for the 911 crew where all they do is go to domestic violence cases, old people who have fallen, and fucking kids that break their ankles at skate parks. Like it's normal day for the EMTs. It's like no. Today there's a magnitude 12 earthquake that's going to bury half the city in rubble. You've got
like it literally, like in the episode, like it split the city streets in half and shit. Like buildings were falling down. But then, like the next week, they're just back in LA. Wait.
How is that show not winning every Emmy under the sun? Right? I don't get it. God. Okay, so that was Vigil on the BBC, and Vigil. Then on Starz, Vigil, which it happens to be the name of the submarine that the DCI gets sent to. Rose Leslie from Game of Thrones and Downton Abbey is also in it, and. Stephen Delane, who played Stannis Baratheon, is also in it. He plays the
submarine
Her
captain?
Majesty's Navy. No, he's the admiral.
Oh, okay.
He's
I'm already sold on this show. Like I agree.
Really
though. I enjoy British procedurals so much more right now.
Hell yes.
Yeah. So Kevin, you'll probably enjoy this.
Where do you even watch the BBC right now?
It's you can.
There's the BBC Player, which is like basically an app that you pay for. It's like $5.99 a month or something. Or through Amazon, you can get BritBox.
Yeah,
which has most of all of the BBC stuff. So,
or you can just get, or even not through Amazon, just regular BritBox. You can also download that app by itself.
Oh, there you go.
I know that. And there's also a BBC America app, which has a few of these things on it. It doesn't have as much.
Okay. So
I would bet this is probably on there though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it had that.
I don't know if they do stuff like weekly when it's brand new, or if they put stuff on those apps after it's completely run.
Yeah.
But like we said, it's the last show. I believe is today or tomorrow of this season, anyways. The second thing I watched was the show called Pier 45, which is on Stars. It's 2 seasons. It takes place on an oil rig. And it's essentially it's the very first scene of the show is there's a woman who's climbing like a communications tower on the derrick. She falls to her death. So they have to send out, it's always off the coast of Norway. I'm suddenly realizing that these UK programs, but the oil rig's off the coast of Norway. So you've got she comes out, then there's a Scottish guy, you have a couple Norwegian oil rig workers, then there's sort of the company shill manager guy who wastes his time playing online poker in the operations center instead of actually paying attention to what's going on. So the investigator comes out, and it starts as a murder investigation, but it kind of morphs into this. You remember how contained thrillers became the thing for movies for a while? Like a bunch of people stuck in a house or something, and one by one they're getting offed, and it becomes a study on human behavior and how sort of civility breaks down as kind of tension rises and people start accusing one another of all these things. It ends up that there's a drug smuggling operation going on with heroin being run through the rig. And it's who was involved with that? Who knew? What are the motivations? How many people, who's going to end up, surviving this whole thing at the end? There's a couple nice plot twists to it. And then the second season picks up and it's a whole different cast of characters, except for there's one holdover. I won't say who it is for the sake of spoilers, but it's good. And it's kind of, it's one of those, it's not like jump scare type of stuff. It's more of the anxiety of when somebody's, walking down like a darkened hallway. They've got their flashlight. They're trying to figure out why the radio stopped working or whatever the problem is. So it kind of builds on that through the entirety of the series. It's that kind of don't open that door. Dude, don't be stupid. Don't go down that hallway. Put a chain on the door, walk away, go back to the operations center, have a coffee. It's kind of like that thing. But it was good. It's not 5-star, but it's a nice study on the breakdown of what happens when people are in crazy circumstances and there's really no way to get out. Oh, and of course there's a hurricane because it's an oil rig, so there's that going on too.
And and you said this was Pier 45 on Netflix?
On Stars.
Stars,
Pier 45. The third thing that I watched, which was on Netflix, and this is the one. So the name of the show is Dark, and
yes.
So Netflix, even though it's an American-based company, they have obviously broad appeal, but they have started setting up essentially production companies in a lot of other countries. So they will produce these, rights or they'll produce these programs that people have written in other countries. So they're not American centric. So Dark takes place in Germany.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, this show is so mind-blowing good. First of all, if you don't like having to keep track of a lot of stuff going on that can be easily confusing, don't watch this show.
You cannot look away. You can't look away. You can't miss a minute.
Okay, in the same way for anyone who watched Lost, the J.J. Abrams program Lost, that ran for 7 years from 2006 or so till about 2013. This is like that. You have sort of intersecting timelines that are all sort of parallel realities next to each other. Everyone in the show who starts out as a part of a family or a family unit, everybody in the whole town ends up being interconnected in one way or another. And if you watch all 3 seasons of the show, it will completely blow your mind that a group of people or a person sat down and actually kept track of how to make all of these things fit together. It's if you've ever tried to put together like one of those 3D puzzles, this is like a 10D puzzle that you mentally have to put together as you're watching it on the screen. I would say it's the best episodic program that I have seen that deals with these kind of very cerebral scientific issues since Lost. Mm-hmm. It's so fucking good. Like, everybody in it is good. The young group of kids who are in it are great. The adults who are in it are great. The more, I don't know what I'd say, the senior citizen characters are great. And they're all played. Those characters have to be played almost similarly. I don't even want to really say why, because it sort of gives a lot away. Yeah. But thematically, everyone who plays those characters kind of has to play them the same way, and it's so well done. I actually watched it because I didn't want to watch it dubbed. I watched it in German with English subtitles, but dubbing has gotten a lot better. I just can't speak to how well it's done in English.
I watched it dubbed with subtitles. Actually, I did both. Because I knew, like, I had already heard about it, knew that I couldn't
because it's
miss anything.
Dubbed with a German accent.
Yeah, dude, the dubbing is solid though. Okay. It's not distracting, anyways.
Okay, so anyone who enjoys the kind of science fiction, and it's not like future sci-fi. It's present day. It's very rooted in reality, aside from the kind of Stephen Hawking type, Kip Thorne kind of physics issues that it goes into.
So but is it done, or is this because you said it's 3 seasons?
No, it's
the
done.
The third season is the last one.
Right. Yeah, the whole thing is on Netflix. So if you're into that sort of really cerebral kind of like you just you kind of want to be confused at the same time you're watching it, but it's so intriguing to you that you want to know what happens next. Just find a way to watch it. It was suggested to me by a Spanish friend of mine, and she just said, "I guarantee you, knowing you, you will not be able to stop watching it." And I watched the whole thing in like 6 days. I was just like, I'd pause it to make sandwiches, and I'd come back to the coffee table and I'd eat. I'd pause it to go to the bathroom, and then I'd come back and I would watch it. And I loved it. I would.
That's the thing too, is saying it like that. There's not a moment that you can just walk away and do something and not worry about it. Mm-mm. If you're gonna look away, you need to pause it.
Yeah,
because
everything that happens on your phone, or you're gonna like check Facebook, pause it, because there will be stuff like sitting on a table that you'll recognize from something else, or something on a wall, and all of nothing is there by mistake. It's all in the frame of the shot for a reason. It was just beautiful. I've been raving about it since I watched it. I think I sent Pete a direct message or a post about it or something.
You may have, yeah. Well, I just you described it to add it to my Netflix queue.
Yeah, no, it just sounds phenomenal. Really cool.
Yeah, it does.
The one thing that made me laugh is that apparently everybody in Germany knows how to like climb up and down ropes in caves.
Yeah,
there's this businesswoman that shows up. She got high heels on and she climbs down a rope, and I was like, "All right, everybody in Germany can do this."
It is part of the high school training in case we ever decide to bring back the fatherland.
Yes,
but we don't talk about that much.
It's right.
It's like the one ridiculous thing that caught me, but otherwise, no, it's so brilliant.
It's so good. Yeah, it's so good. I mean, I would love to come back if you guys ever did if everybody saw it and you just wanted to do a thing just on that. I would love to be a part of that, because I just think there's so much depth to it. And it's not the kind of thing where it leaves loose ends. Even though it's almost every character in it is almost a main character, and there must be something on the order of 20 or 25 of them that you're following, Kevin, roughly.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's especially when you go with the different ages and stuff too. Like it's
right.
Now it takes place in the 80s, doesn't it?
No, well, it takes place over a longer period of time than a human lifespan. How's that?
Okay.
Yeah, there you go.
All right. So I think it's up to Kevin's turn now.
Yeah, I know. Like, it's been a long time since we recorded. I know we've watched a bunch of shit, or I've watched a bunch of shit, but the only thing that I can think about has been Stargate. I've been on this run of trying to watch some of this this kind of brand of sci-fi that I particularly love. Alex watched Dark Matter a while back, so I talked about that before him. That's one of my favorite shows, and that is in the process of hopefully getting brought back to have a conclusion run. I follow the director of that show on everything, and he's working on trying to pitch it as a miniseries comeback, because sci-fi, being the retards that they are, sorry for using the R word, idiots that they are, how about that? Canceled it when it was like one of their top rated shows. They also canceled The Expanse, which then got sent to Amazon Prime, and
so good.
Got like 4 more seasons.
Yeah.
And then Sci-Fi probably made another Sharknado.
Nope, Sci-Fi now has Child's Play, the TV series.
Sci-Fi can go fuck itself. I won't watch anything on Sci-Fi.
Yeah. They have
never
no
again
idea what they're doing anymore.
Yeah, they have no idea. The only show that I'm disappointed that I haven't watched is Resident Alien with Alan Tudyk.
Yeah.
But anyways, I'm already off track.
I'll hit Sci-Fi again if they bring back Scare Tactics.
Go away. You're the reason that they're fucked up.
Yeah, my actually, 2 of my very good friends were on Scare Tactics many times because they're twins and they're kind of awkward and scary looking. So
that's hella
not
funny.
scary looking, but they can be made to be scary looking. They always shot Scare Tactics in Vegas, no matter where it said it was happening. It was always happening in Vegas. So I would just be like, I'd call my friend one day and I'd be like, "Hey, how's it going?" They'd be like, "Oh, I'm just hanging out in Vegas." And I'd be like, "Oh, Scare Tactics again?" "Yep, Scare Tactics." It was just like all the time. So if they brought Scare Tactics back, they would be really appreciative because they made a ton of money.
They're creepy twins.
That's right.
Yeah. So, anyways, so I decided I had always watched like episodes of Stargate here and there when it was on a million years ago. I think it started in 1997.
It's on USA, wasn't it?
No, it was. I think it was Sci-Fi.
Was it a Sci-Fi?
But it was Sci-Fi before it was, SYFY for some dumb fuck reason. But it was before Battlestar Galactica. Like it was kind of the show that kept Sci-Fi going. Yeah, and so it's a direct continuation of the movie. So you could watch the movie and then start watching the show. Richard Dean Anderson, MacGyver, plays Kurt Russell's character, and Michael Shanks takes over as James Spader's character. And then they start peppering in some other characters.
Wasn't Stargate the only movie that James Spader was in where he wasn't a completely creepy, weird villain guy?
Maybe.
No, dude, he was the love interest in what was the St. Elmo's Fire, right? Oh no, that was Andrew. That Andrew McCarthy?
That was Andrew McCarthy.
Wasn't James Spader like the guy in one of the Molly Ringwald movies?
No, he was the dick Blaine in
the most 80s name ever.
Exactly, that played opposite Andrew McCarthy. Like it was it was Pretty in Pink.
Pretty in Pink.
For fuck's sakes, yeah. He's a total creepy asshole.
All right.
But anyways, he's not even on the show.
The answer to your question might be yes.
But so, and they do a pretty good job. I mean, Richard Dean Anderson plays definitely a more lighthearted version of the character than Kurt Russell does. And I would say, especially because now I've been watching for a while, so there's 10 seasons of Stargate. There's 2 spin-offs. There was 5 seasons of Stargate Atlantis and then 2 seasons of Stargate Universe. So I watched, I'm into season 9 of the original Stargate.
What about Stargate Continuum?
Wasn't there SG-1
That's a movie.
also?
That's a movie. Okay.
What's that?
What was SG-1?
That's the main one. So Stargate SG-1
okay.
is the series.
Okay.
And man, like Richard, it's an ensemble show. So there's 4 main characters that they really work around, but like the heart and soul of the show is Richard Dean Anderson's character. And he's like just so fucking likable in that show. Like he's like my spirit animal. But like all the relationships that he has with the characters make all the other characters kind of who they are. So there's there's a female lead that gets brought in the first episode, and she sticks with the show. And there's always a spark between the two, which is kind of cool to see them develop, and their relationship's always really great. But they're so into the chain of command that while there's that will they, won't they kind of thing, it never takes over the show, because the simple fact is that they won't, right? You just know that they won't. Like every now and then, like they do a time loop episode where Richard Dean Anderson's character is stuck in the time loop for so long that at one point they're all in the main office, and he turns in his resignation letter. He's like, I fucking quit. Gives it to the general. He takes it, and so then he kisses Carter, who's the girl. Okay. And then the time loop starts over. So it's like the only time they ever get to like have their moment is in a semi-comedic episode where he's like, fuck it, I've done this for like 10 years, I quit.
Speaking of
he
time
plants
loops,
one on her, and
they are working on the reboot of
Quantum Leap
with Scott Bakula involved.
Yeah, as what? He can't leap through anything anymore. You just saw him on the Emmys. He's like 150 years old.
Well, him after his turn as Captain Archer on Star Trek Enterprise, I'm not really. I don't care to see him in anything anymore, really.
I like him a lot, but he should not, at least not be the
now,
lead.
If he was like the Dean Stockwell character,
that's what makes more sense to me than doing anything. He can't be jumping through time.
No. If he becomes the Dean Stockwell character, I think that would actually be a pretty cool thing.
Yeah.
All right, sorry.
So, that's all right, because it's all the same stuff, and it's all kind of around the same era. I think Quantum Leap is probably actually before Stargate.
Oh yeah, late 80s.
Yeah, because Stargate was 97. You're right about that.
Yeah. I'm gonna go. Quantum Leap was maybe like 88 through 92 or 93, somewhere like that.
Yeah, that sounds pretty close.
89 through
89. Wow.
Wow, 97 episodes of that fucking show.
Yeah. Well,
I wonder if that show
Stargate has 213 episodes.
Jesus.
So yeah, Stargate is from the era of television where everything was 20 episodes, 22 episodes.
22 episodes, yeah.
So, and so it's funny because it was a trip to watch, because I started watching it and the first 7 seasons are pre-HD. Oh, so wow. Everything is in the square.
Oh, 3 to 4, 4:3 ratio.
Yeah, it was a trip.
Yeah,
and
it's very interesting because I didn't think the movie itself was that good. Like, it was fun and enjoyable.
Oh, I enjoyed the movie.
I liked the movie a lot.
Yeah.
But this show has to be really good
with T.J. Mullen.
Oh Jesus, this show has to be. It's got 17 seasons? You said, or 7 seasons?
Well, between the 3 shows, it's got 17 seasons.
That's. I mean.
They also did a spinoff though, where the old woman, Catherine, is younger. They did like a Stargate Catherine, or maybe just a show called Catherine, but it's about her as like maybe a 20 or 30-year-old. I don't know if it only had 1 season or if it even made it to a full season, but I know they made one. Maybe it was a movie.
I'll have to look for that. I haven't heard of that. But yeah, so what happens at the end of season 7 is they go looking for the lost city of Atlantis, which turns out it's an alien city created by the people that created the Stargates in the first place. And so I have actually been watching it in the way that it aired. So now once I started season 8, I would watch 1 episode of SG-1, and then I would watch an episode of Atlantis and go back and forth. Just to keep the original watch timeline down. And it was really interesting because the first season of Atlantis basically has nobody from the original series. And the first episode, I was kind of like, I don't know if this is going to be as good as it, as the other one, if I'm going to like it as much. And after the first episode, I actually really got into it. I really like the characters. They're all interesting. They all have their own stories to tell. So it was pretty cool. And then in season 9 of SG1, Richard Dean Anderson leaves. And it kind of breaks up the team. So the girl that played Carter seems like she hasn't been on it much. And all the relationships that he was so central in aren't there anymore. And I was a little concerned about that. And then they brought in, I don't know if you guys know who Claudia Black is. She's a voiceover actress. She was on Farscape. She's been in some other stuff. And she's fucking hilarious. Like, she's so over the top and funny. It was pretty amazing, actually. But she does a really good job on there too.
There's actually, I didn't realize there's actually, if you go and look at IMDb, so there is, it's called Stargate Catherine. It ran 10 episodes in 2018, and it's a story of Catherine first trying to unlock the secrets of the Stargate to save humanity from a dark fate. But there's also like Stargate SG-1 Children's of the God Final Cut. Looks like there was they made a made for TV movie out of that.
Well, they did 2 straight to DVD movies of
Stargate Base Gamma.
No, they did Stargate Continuum and Stargate.
Yeah, I see Continuum, and then there's Universe,
and then Arc of Truth is the other one.
That's what it is. Okay, yeah, here it is. Yeah, Stargate: The Arc of Truth. There's also, believe it or not, there was a cartoon series, Stargate Infinity.
That surprised me, but I don't know if it's canon. Hold on one second. My dog's being weird. I'll be right back.
Was this movie, like, seriously, I thought it was a fun movie, but I can't believe it was like that good that has inspired all of fucking this. Like, this is
Pete, they made 9 movies based on Fast and the Furious. If someone will watch it and they'll make money on it, they will make it.
I get it. Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, but, and it's very, very little like the movie. I mean, if you think about the movie itself, it gives you a jumping off point, and that's all it is. You have a doorway to other worlds. So in the TV show, they're like, yep, there's a phenomenal amount of worlds that they can go to, and then they jump off from there. And they only keep 2 characters from the movie.
Huh.
And then it's the whole new stories and stuff.
Well, if I remember correctly from the movie, most of those guys died anyway.
Most of those guys died.
Yeah, and I think at the end of the movie, I think even James Spader's character stays behind.
He does.
Yeah.
With the pseudo Egyptian girl.
Yep. And what's funny is that on Netflix, if you start watching it, the entire series is listed as MA for the sole reason that somehow in the pilot there's boobs. Huh. In the pilot of the TV episode, they have actual boobs, and from then on, like, the show shows up as TVMA, even though it never happens again. And I can't imagine that it happened when it was on TV.
Was Sci-Fi a paid channel to begin with? I don't remember that.
I don't know.
No, so
no,
you can't.
I don't know. They probably blurred it out at the time, and then
that's a good point.
And then Netflix doesn't care.
It's actually been a while now. You never really noticed it, but like with like the Fox networks, like FX and some of those, they did that. Once you hit 9:00, you can actually say whatever the fuck you want on basic cable, as long as you put a disclaimer that it is harsh language, sexual situations. Like, you go back and watch Nip Tuck, that show's fucking whacked. Like, everything that they show on that.
But that's not that's pay cable though, Pete, because that's not part of quote unquote basic cable. Like, basic cable is pretty much just ABC, NBC, CBS, and then local channels. That's it. Like, upstream channels.
I don't
say,
even.
Look,
Even though that's sort of part of my job.
Anything past like channel 20 or 21, generally, like as soon as you hit like the ESPNs and on, like MSNBC and CNN and Fox News and Business and all that, like Lifetime and Hallmark, that you pay for a package beyond basic quote unquote cable. Yeah.
All right, I feel like we've gotten real far afield of what we were talking about. So
Yeah,
I'm going to take
This
over.
has been the uninteresting news hour brought to you by
Kevin's
the-
been done
Yeah.
with Stargate.
Stargate's
Let him,
great.
he'll keep talking. He'll dark matter this whole thing. And
Yeah, I will, because that's where it ends up, man.
I'm going to go quickly. I'm going to give my pitch for Brockmire. I give this to everyone. It's you can watch it on Hulu. It originally aired on IFC a few years back. It's brilliant. Hank Azaria is the main character, and essentially what happens in the first episode is he finds out his wife has been cheating on him and that she's like super sexually promiscuous, and he basically has a meltdown on air because he is the radio announcer for the Kansas City Royals at the time. And so
I've seen previews for this.
It's him and Amanda Peet.
Damn funny. It's not very long. I mean, you're talking like 10 episodes a season, 4 seasons. That's it. It's real
30,
short.
30 minutes too, right?
30 minutes. Yeah. It is. I don't think there's anything on TV that I laugh harder at than Brockmire. It is so funny. If you have any love for baseball in any capacity, it's even that much better. But you don't need to like baseball to like the show. So that's my Brockmire pitch. Everyone should watch it.
Dude, this cast goes pretty
really
deep
great.
too.
It's
for the guest stars that, come on. Like,
it's kind of like The League, where they get like a whole shit ton of the sports stars to come on and make like very small little cameos and then move on. Next, 9 Perfect Strangers. We've discussed it in the past. It had its final episode, and we watched it last night. And I got to be honest, I really, really like the show, but I don't know that they stuck the ending, in my opinion.
Huh.
So I know you guys haven't finished it yet. I look forward to seeing what you guys have to say about it. But my 2 cents was I thought it was really good, and it felt like they just kind of rushed the ending. It just felt like it didn't really.
That might be the way it's supposed to be, because at least that's what Christy said she felt with the end of Big Little Lies.
Yeah.
That like
I liked Big
Little
Lies. I didn't think that was rushed for me.
No, I thought
that
the first season of Big Little Lies was good.
Better.
Yeah.
Better than the second. Yeah.
Well, the second season just wasn't terribly good in general.
Yeah.
It was not needed. I think.
Live up to the first season.
Yeah.
And then Only Murders in the Building. It's on Hulu. It stars
Steve Martin.
Steve Martin Short, and Selena Gomez.
Yep.
And it is probably my favorite thing on television right now.
Okay, cool.
So fun. Steve Martin's doing great stuff. I am not a fan of Martin Short, but I feel like this character is written to his strengths, and he really does the character well, and he's not too over the top. And
he's got a pocket that he works in. Like if you put him in just the right parts, he's hilarious.
He's in the right part, and they've got him restrained enough in this role that he's good, and I enjoy him quite a lot. I can't think of anyone else who could play the role. Like they clearly just wrote it for him, but they did a great job in doing so. And Selena Gomez is amazing. Like,
is she?
I've been a
Dude,
huge fan
I
of
love
hers
her. Yeah.
since the beginning, because my daughter made me watch all of the Selena Gomez shit all through her rise and everything, and seen her in concert. And
one of the best pandemic shows was her cooking show.
No,
it was like,
watch it.
Oh, it's great, dude. It was a lot of fun. It was her in her home. Some producer she knew sent her a bunch of like cameras that they could set up and film, because she could only have like one person over, because it was like the height of the pandemic.
Yeah.
And I think it's just called Selena and Chef or something like that. And what happens is she brings a friend over, or a family member, and then on the other end of the Zoom call, she has some famous chef showing her how to make something. And it's just it was just a kind of a sweet show to have.
Yeah.
During that time, I think it's on HBO Max.
I like her. She's cool, and she's great in this show. It basically, the premise is someone dies in the building. These 3 characters come together because they all love murder mystery podcasts. Then they decide we'll make our own murder mystery podcast, and it's kind of like It's like all of the stuff that's been. Ted Lasso did it with the rom-com episode. Hot Fuzz did it where they lay out all the tropes and then they proceed to do all the tropes. But this time it's with murder mystery podcasts. Again, you don't have to be a fan of murder mystery podcasts to enjoy the show, but it does add to it if you are. So highly recommend the show. I don't know how many are left. I don't know how long this season is. We're like 6 or 7 into it. So
is it already that far? Wow.
I think it's getting pretty close to being over maybe. But it's been fun. My daughter, who, obviously has not grown up in the you must wait a week between shows era, has only recently been introduced to it with the Disney Plus shows. And then now this, Apple TV she's Plus, drooling every Tuesday to come home and watch it when it comes on. She loves it.
So it looks like there's only going to be 10 episodes.
No, okay.
And you're 6 in right now.
Yeah.
Or episode 7 comes out on the 28th.
Yeah, it's been really excellent. I've been enjoying it quite a lot. And I'll wrap it up real quickly with Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
Did that come to an end, right?
It did. It came to an end. Ooh, this season, in my opinion, was not good. It was super lackluster. It's like none of them were really invested in it. The writing wasn't very good. It all felt rushed. It just felt heavy-handed. Like none of it worked. The last episode was good because it traded on a bunch of tropes that had been established long throughout it. But I don't know. Other than that, it was really kind of a not great. I don't know. It felt really weak.
Just not a good way for that show to go out.
Not strong.
But that show had a fairly long run, right?
Yeah, I think this was season 9. But the show got shorter as the seasons got shorter as the show got on. Like it started off with like the traditional 22, and then it kind of got down to like an 18, and then like 15, and then like a 12, and then
I think it got shorter after it switched networks too.
It did.
I think once it was on NBC, it was shorter than when it was on Fox.
Yeah, and then they just slapped together 10 episodes. They ran them in 5 weeks. They ran them 2 a week.
Yeah, they were doing 2 a week.
Yeah. So they just slammed it in, like, boom, right at the end of summer, just before fall started. And then it ended, and then all the fall programming picked up. So I don't know. It felt like it would have been better if they'd have just let it die than this travesty. But I don't know. That's my opinion. So we'll move on from here then to Ted Lasso. I think it's been a couple weeks, so a few episodes have happened. But I think we wanted to discuss the Coach Beard episode.
Well,
the acid trip that was an episode.
But that and before the major reveal of who Rebecca has been.
Who she's been texting.
Yeah.
That was interesting. I didn't see it. And when they reveal, I didn't obviously once they start showing it to you, you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. I did not pick him.
If you go back and you watch, those two flirt from moment one. He gets stumbly around her. He can't speak. He's like always kind of looking down and looking away, and he talks more around her because I've watched the whole show, I think 3 or 4 times through now.
Yeah.
Well, it's a great show.
Good.
I turn it on in the background, and I still laugh at every joke.
Yeah, so, it's each episode.
And it's a quick burn. It's a quick burn, especially the first season. The second season has gotten longer. Yeah. Like the episodes are getting towards 45 minutes and longer.
Yeah, the last 3 have been 45-minute long episodes. It was interesting to see that transition.
It's definitely again. Probably one of the best things on TV.
Oh yeah,
in the last, last 10 years. I mean, it's usually I don't buy into the whole 22 Emmy nominations. Look at that. It deserves every fucking award it gets for whatever they give it.
Those Emmy nominations were rough though, man. Like for best supporting actor, it was like the whole coaching staff other than including Higgins. So it was Roy Kent, Higgins, Nathan, and Beard, all 4 of them up for the same award. I was like, that's just brutal.
Yeah.
Like, I feel so bad for all those actors knowing that Roy Kent's going to walk away with it easily. That has nothing to do with their acting. That just has to do with his character is fucking phenomenal.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is awesome. Have you seen him outside of that show?
I have not.
His voice is
totally different, dude.
His comedy is hilarious. The affect is different. He walks different.
Yeah.
He moves different. It's another one of those cases where you get a stand-up that they find just the right part for him, and it's like, oh, this dude can fucking act. When you give him the right thing.
He deserves an Emmy because that is not fucking him at all. Like, it is such a leap from who he is. Like, for Jason Sudeikis, you see him playing Ted Lasso, and you're like, oh no, he's doing a good job. But like, you can also see that being Jason Sudeikis. Like, this dude, totally different. Brett Goldstein is a totally just like everything about him changed.
Yeah,
you know, like Jason Sudeikis walks around and he's very Ted Lasso-ish in real life.
Yeah,
you know, like,
oh my god,
his mannerisms. And
I forgot to ask you this during the Golden Globes because I think you watched it too on the Golden Globes. He was so high.
Oh, when he was in his white hoodie?
Yes. It was so funny how high he was.
I didn't see it. I just know that he got his in a hoodie.
Well, it's like you're at home, and I think it's because everybody's been at home, and it was the middle of the kind of thing. It was kind of like, bro, just a quick little doot 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 doot.
But he was in London. He was in London actively shooting Ted Lasso 2, and so when the whole thing happened, it was like the middle of the night for him. So he might not have been high. He just might have been on no.
He could have been just wrecked.
Oh no, he was high.
Yeah.
There were because there were times when at the Golden Globes that they'd like show like people doing stuff in the background, like what they were doing.
You could see him with like his bong, just like
you could just tell, like you could tell
he was just doing lines. They catch him right in the middle. He's like, oh,
well, no, like one time at one point he like put a glass down, stopped, pulled away, and then double checked to make sure the glass didn't fall off the desk. That is a classic stoner thing to do. Like, and he just, I'm telling you, if you could find clips of him from the Golden Globes, you'll be like, oh no, he's high. Like,
I'm gonna have to go look for it.
Hey man, if that's what it takes to make that show, send that guy more weed.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
All right. So Sam is Rebecca's secret fling, and we get a little bit of that, and then we get thrown into the Coach Beard episode, which I got to be honest, I truly love, but it's not a good Ted Lasso episode.
No.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
Anything to move along the story. It just gives you a little insight into the cool fucking dude that Beard is.
The Beard is, yeah.
And it gives it gave the soccer hooligans a little room to stretch.
That was fun.
And they were
fun. Yeah, man.
Yeah.
I need to watch it again too, because there was something like, and I didn't quite get the reasoning behind it, but there was a very significant use of the moon in the episode. Like, the moon was in the background all the time, but at one point they were in a back alley, and instead of a light outside of a bar, it was the moon. Like, so it was very
I think they tied the moon to Jane at some point in the earlier.
Is that what it was?
Yeah. Because I watched the episode a second time, and I picked up a couple more things when I went through it again. I loved it the second time. Like, the first time I was like, what the fuck is, I was like, this is not a Ted Lasso episode. It's so out of left field. But when you go watch it on its own, I mean, there's doing some amazing shit in there. So
yeah, it was great. And I loved like the big ass dude that comes and saves him. Like the British Dave Bautista.
Yeah.
That was so funny.
I love the two soccer commentators following him around, like
just talking shit.
Just talking shit the entire time.
Oh god, that show is so fucking good.
Yeah. Yeah, that show.
Yeah, it's funny though, if you look at it on IMDb, like, this was the episode that people did not like.
Yeah.
Oh no,
like the score for it is way low.
Which I get. I do get like that because it's not, like you said, it's not a Ted Lasso episode.
Not a Ted Lasso episode.
Oh, my wife hated it. My wife hated that episode.
See, I thought it was amusing because I think Beard is, in so many ways, of all the coaching staff, underutilized. Like, he's a total sniper. Like, and that's a perfect position for him. But this was when you take him and they go, you know what? We're going to give you an episode full of Beard. And it was perfect for that.
It was what I wanted from Beard too. I mean, it was fantastic. So I love the episode. I'm glad to hear that it's being considered a bonus episode and that like we're not losing an episode because it's not an episode of Ted Lasso.
Yeah,
kind of
exactly.
like the Christmas episode really isn't an episode of Ted Lasso. It's kind of got a totally different feel. It's got that holiday British episode feel to it.
Oi,
which they did
dentist?
for like 2 or 3 episodes. They did kind of their trope episode, right? Because they did their rom-com, they did their Christmas special. They kind of did their trippy ass, episode with the Beard one, right? Like just the bizarre, like, out there. But yeah, it was cool. It was
just a second. I'll be right back.
Sure. But it was a cool episode. I dug it.
All right. Well, we'll move on, I think, to the next thing we wanted to talk about, which was Shang Chi, and Jared hasn't seen it yet anyways. So
there you go.
His departure doesn't hurt us. So I don't know. Pete said he had some things to say, so we'll let Pete start.
Yeah.
I loved this fucking movie. It was
I'm in the same boat. Yeah.
Now I know I'm going to make a comparison here, and it's not as a comparison to the movie itself, but I went into this just like I did with Guardians of the Galaxy. I understood. Okay, the 10 rings are involved somehow. There's some Mandarin stuff in the background. We're not 100% sure exactly, what the rings are going to be in this universe. But that's all I knew about the Shang-Chi character. Same thing with Guardians. I knew Rocket Raccoon. And I was like, you know what? It's the new one. I'm going to go and see it. We went and saw it. This was, because I kept telling people, like, when we talk about it, they'd be like, so have you seen it yet? I'm like, no, I'm going Sunday, blah, blah. It's, but if nothing else, it's going to be a good Kung Fu movie. It was that and more. And the fight choreography was absolutely amazing. And they pulled from so many, well, I can't say so many, but at least a couple different that I could like outwardly identify, Asian cinema. Like the whole scene with the scaffolding, that was Jackie Chan.
Oh yeah,
like
for sure.
Straight, like you look at that, all the wire work type stuff that was very Crouching Tiger.
It was very Crouching Tiger in places,
but it worked. Like, oh yeah, no, when Bad Dude first meets his wife in the in the little glade, just that whole exchange, then fight between the two of them, so cool. Awkwafina stole this movie.
This was her.
Me.
It was like talking about Martin Short though. Like she has a pocket. Sometimes she can be too much. And in this movie, she was not. Like, she was fantastic in this movie.
Absolutely perfect.
I would argue she was a smidgen too much, but not so bad. I feel like they wrote her into some stuff that you were like,
yeah, for sure.
She coming along, you're like,
yeah.
Okay, whatever. Like, we'll let it slide. I loved the movie as well. I loved it because it was pretty much just a kung fu movie.
Yeah.
Like, it didn't tie into the Marvel films until the very, very end. Until then, it was just its own thing. And
exactly.
I mean, it does. And
but it does, but it doesn't. Because the whole Wong showing up there thing is just a total fun little cameo. Like it's like, oh, it's here. And it doesn't tie into it. Actually, if you watch it, doesn't tie into anything else until
Trevor shows up. Trevor ties it in.
And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, you're in the MCU. Now this makes sense.
But also, Trevor is like such a minor character.
Yes.
It's not like Iron Man showed up. No, it was fucking Trevor.
Yeah.
Right? So
it was the glue, right?
Yeah. And so he shows up, and I thought, honestly, that Trevor was going to be the post-credit scene. I thought they would tie him in some point. And I had joked with my buddy Nesto. I was like, okay, Nesto, we're going to see Trevor in the post-credit scene. And when he showed up halfway through the movie, man, I just started laughing. I was like, man, they have got some balls. They're just gonna bring him in. Okay, cool, let's do it.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. The other thing that was cool too is when they go into that magical land. All those creatures
yes.
are like real Chinese mythological creatures, which I thought was really cool. Like they didn't go off the boards, they didn't screw it up, they didn't make up their own stuff. They tried to be really authentically Chinese for this too,
and
which is interesting because that's one of the big complaints about the character in the comic books.
Yeah,
is that at least from his origins, it was really kind of fucked up. Like it was kind of a racist cartoon and or comic, and really not very well thought out. And this didn't feel that way at all.
Nesto is saying that the Mandarin is an Iron Man character.
Yeah,
he's not.
Yeah,
and so they had taken and combined it, and apparently. The Shang-Chi's father in the comic books is a character named Fu Manchu.
Yeah.
Obviously, is quite problematic nowadays, and so they decided to take the two characters and merge them together into one only slightly problematic character, and then move on from there.
Well, and even then, like when he talks about being the Mandarin, he points out that that's not his name. Like he didn't give himself that name. Like that's the name that other people have used for him, which I thought was cool too, because they just kind of took this thing that is messed up and kind of sweep it under the rug and keep going.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was.
Well,
it was good. Like
damn fine job with the film.
It was almost like Black Widow was for being a female-led movie, where this was a martial arts movie, but it still felt like a hero's movie, and it wasn't all about the martial arts.
Yeah,
like it was in there, and it was really great, but it wasn't necessarily the most important part of the film. And his character, I thought he was great. I thought he was super charismatic. I liked him a lot.
Yeah,
I love the fact that he was a fucking stock photos model before this.
Yes,
like if you saw that on Instagram, like that was all over the place. That was hilarious. But dude, he's gonna do well after this, I think.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's
But yeah, it was a good flick. I'm excited for it to come out on Disney Plus because I want to watch it again, but I'm not going to go out to the movies again to watch it, which is unfortunate. I think if this had come out, or if we were in the same position as we were 2 years ago, I probably would have seen this a couple of times in the theater.
Yeah. Well, actually, I did see it. Now that I think about it, I did see it a couple times in the theater because Soph and I went opening night, and then we also went with her friends again later that Sunday. Like the Sunday after, and it's good. It's just as good the second time when you know shit is gonna happen. Like you don't care.
And I thought too, what was cool is they did have some very cartoony type characters. Like you have the dragons, you have all those mythological creatures, and they don't feel cartoony. Like they felt. Pretty real, which was pretty great. The creature
design team did an amazing job, like with the dogs. Like they look like those. Like you looked at them and you said, "Oh, yeah, this is exactly what someone would have seen if they were going to carve this dog out of stone and put it in front of a building." Like it made perfect sense. The movie is completely predictable in so many ways, and I didn't care. I knew like from the minute they explained how they trapped the nothing or whatever it was, in the.
Oh yeah, you knew he was going to break it open and that it was going to get
open. I knew that the dragon. I knew that they were going to bring out another dragon. You know, as soon as they said it was a dragon, did that. I just didn't care.
No,
like it didn't. I knew it was coming, and as soon as it happened, like my brain went, "Oh yeah." But I was still like, fuck, that looks really, really good. And he's not. I loved that they didn't have like when the two of them get on the dragon's back, how they're not just like sitting up like they're riding a fucking horse, like they're holding on for fucking dear life as this.
They're not on
like,
Falcor, man.
Like it. It's just overall, all in all, it was a good movie. Jared, I know you said you didn't see it. I think you will actually be pleasantly surprised when it comes out on Disney Plus. It's a lot better than I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be an early phase 4, like, okay, we have to have something out before the Eternals, so we're building some things as we go.
The funny thing is with the MCU, I tend to. I mean, I enjoy being a contrarian anyways to sort of prevailing opinions, generally speaking. But I genuinely tend to like the MCU movies that most people don't, or at least they kind of get sort of bagged on the most.
Favorite one's Thor 2. There you go.
I mean, I think Thor 2 is pretty good. I think Thor 2 is better than Thor 1, frankly. I do. But I really like Captain Marvel, like a lot. I think it's one of the better MCU films out of all 20, whatever many there are. The same thing with Black Widow. I thought it was very realistic.
I like Black Widow.
We love Black. Yeah, Black
Widow. The kind
of
family back and forth, the banter is exactly what I hear families sound like. The father not really understanding the daughters when they're after the rescue scene, when she's talking about it's like they put you in a room and they chop up your insides, and he's like, oh, all right, I get it. She's like, stupid man, or whatever she says to him. But so yeah, I mean, I'm not. I'll admit, like martial arts films are not particularly a sort of genre that I go to, but I'll see it, and I'm not anti it in any way. I just hope that it holds up. You know what I mean? But you guys seem to really enjoy it and think that it was a quality production and well done, so that speaks good about it. To be honest, I haven't heard much about it yet. I mean, I don't care about spoilers, but I mean, I haven't heard many people, like friends of mine on social media, saying anything about it. So I don't really know what the general consensus so far is about.
I don't know that there's anything to spoil, honestly. Like Pete said, pretty fucking predictable film. It's just there's well made and entertaining. That's really, what
Kevin, you said it's November 12th. Is that what you said?
Yeah, is when it's going to hit Disney Plus.
Okay. All right. Well, that gives Black Widow hits 3 weeks to soak in Dune, which I'll probably see 19 times by the time.
I'm just going to watch it on HBO Max.
Now, see, I think I'm going to go.
I think I'm going to the. I said this to Pete, or I think Kevin, actually, when we spoke a couple of weeks ago, I think I said this, but Dune is just one of those spectacle movies.
It needs scope.
Yeah.
I want to see it, and then I'm immediately going to come home and rewatch it on HBO Max. So the sort of awe-inspiring factor of it is dwindled, and I can pay much more attention to the subtle nuances of the character portrayals and stuff like that. So,
yeah, look, I'm already worried about this movie because the director was a d-bag talking about the Marvel universe.
Yeah, but
yeah, he's like that. I've made
bagged on the Marvel universe, but he still makes damn good movies. So it's
yeah, but he's also Martin Scorsese. He gets a little more leeway than Dennis Villeneuve.
Well, if you look at the depth and breadth of Martin Scorsese films, yeah, because he's been a director for 40 plus years. But in the short time that Denis Villeneuve has been making movies, Sicario, Arrival, Blade Runner 2049. I can't remember the name of the foreign-centric film that he made at the moment. But, I mean, the guy definitely does know how to put images and stories together on a screen. So my concern is that because it's being released in the theater and on HBO Max at the same time, that's going to give Warner Brothers in to say, well, it didn't make a whole ton of money. We don't know if we want you to make part 2. Because to not make part 2 of Dune would be a total fucking travesty, would be a huge mistake on Warner Brothers' part. Not the least of which is to mention that there are 5 other books in that series. And Warner Brothers could have a 20-year-long franchise to soak up a lot of money if they're not stupid about it.
Well, we'll have to see if it's as pretty as the trailer is. The trailer's gorgeous.
God, man.
I think at this point, making movies, it's hard to if it's a movie that needs to look good, unless you just go stupid cheap on your budget. It's hard to not make a good looking movie at this point.
It's true.
What I'm really curious to see is how they take this very. There's a lot of very specific dialogue in Dune.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of very specific story in Dune.
Yep.
That much like people have talked about Asimov's Foundation, which just came out on Apple TV Plus.
Oh, did that start?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
It's one of those things that it's very risky to put on film because if you don't do it just right, it's either boring or it's just shitty.
Because the book is incredibly dense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's incredibly dense. There really is.
I have really high hopes for this just based on what we've seen, because I'm a fan of the original film for what it was. I saw the Sci-Fi Network
the series, the miniseries,
and that was a different interpretation.
It more closely resembled the source material, but it was done at such a low production value that it's terribly hard to watch.
Yeah, like it looked like it was shot on an iPhone,
like an iPhone 1.
Yeah, like it was, and it was one of those things where like you found out how much they spent on it, and you look at it, and you're like, where the fuck did you spend that money?
Yeah,
like it's not here
on graphics from Windows 95 is where they spent that money.
But I have a lot of high hopes for this because it looks really good, and they, much like they did with the first movie, they have assembled a dope ass cast for this. Like the cast
it's gonna be cast
ridiculous.
Yes.
Well, this has been a pie in the sky movie for many years.
Decades.
Yeah.
So we'll see. We'll see if they pulled it off or not. So it definitely is intriguing.
It did well in the overseas box office, just because it had releases in some other countries, and it actually outperformed some other stuff. So that bodes well just for the American box office. But yeah, time will tell.
Yeah, we'll see.
All right.
One note about the MCU, since we're talking about Shang-Chi, it's just really quick. I saw something today, and reposted it on our Instagram and Facebook. But they have officially announced that the multiverse is not just through Spider-Man and Doctor Strange, but it's going to be an ongoing thing in Phase 4.
It feels like
the entirety of Phase 4 is going to be the multiverse.
That's what I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually, in looking at that, and granted, because we haven't seen it yet, but I actually, when I found that out with that announcement, I started going, okay, I'm very interested to see how they wind up then spinning the Eternals into that. Because the other stuff that's slated to come out makes sense for a lot of that.
Well,
but with what I know of the Eternals,
sorry, go ahead.
It's like, I don't know how it's going to lend itself towards that. But then again, the Eternals is so, like, we have no idea exactly what's going on with that at all.
The Eternals strikes me as almost like they're kind of giving, in the same way that, like, in the Tolkien universe, the Middle Earth stories, the Silmarillion is kind of like the Genesis story. And I think the Eternals is kind of a way for the Marvel MCU to kind of say, look, there are these persons that exist in this universe that have existed kind of since the beginning of kind of time. And then, so I think they're kind of giving a basis for everything that's happened over like millennia of time with these kinds of characters. But the thing I wanted to say about what Kevin said about the multiverse being sort of integral and ongoing in Phase 4 is that if you look at the first Doctor Strange movie, if you look at the last Avengers film, and you particularly look at Loki, especially the way it ended, they're introducing to everyone this idea that, okay, for those of you who don't know in the comics, there are alternate realities where different characters do different things, become different things, act different ways. So this is your introduction to it. But I also thought the end of Loki was really important because in that last shot where you actually see the timeline completely splintering, it's a way for them to say any character who's ever died, like i.e. Scarlett Johansson, basically anybody who's ever died, and or what's her name, Zoe Saldana's character,
Gamora.
Gamora. Yes, that they don't have to be dead. Like you may in fact see these characters come back because now there are all these multitudes that we can say, oh, but she didn't die in that universe, and somehow she's arrived in this one, and so that's where I think it's all going. But I think Kevin is definitely right. I think that most of Phase 4 is going to be about that. I mean, you've got Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, then you've got
you just look
Quantum Mania being the name of the Ant-Man and the Wasp movie. So I think it's going to be a recurring.
And it's interesting that it's smart in some ways that they're using Spider-Man to kick it off, because they're like, this could be the last Spider-Man movie we get, under that Marvel heading, unless they figure something out with Sony again. That is a perfect way to do it.
I don't understand why Disney just doesn't say, look, we'll give you $10 billion. for Spider-Man.
Right? Like, yeah. Just,
I mean,
there's
they
actually
have
been
all,
argument
like, this is
that
a company
Disney's
that's worth
been
like $1
doing,
trillion. They just need to be like, look, how much do you want? We'll give it to you, and then be done with it.
There's been argument, or there's been speculation that Disney's eyeballing buying Sony.
Yeah. So Sony Films just for it. Because they're fucking Disney.
Just to
but
be
Sony, not as a company, just like the Sony Entertainment.
Yeah, Sony Entertainment division.
Oh, okay.
Which,
yeah, because they already did it with Fox, and now they got the X-Men.
Yes.
Well, and Lucasfilm, and ABC, and ESPN. I mean, they own. I mean, Disney is a huge company, like ridiculously big. Yeah.
And I'm just saying, if you've been to Disneyland or Disney World, I really feel like Disney should just be in charge of running the country as well. We'd have no trash.
That's a bridge. That's a bridge. I don't know if I can cross.
No trash on the streets. Like,
yeah, we're gonna fall really far afield if we don't move. So, do we want to just plow on through, or do we want to actually take a break?
If you guys want to start plowing, I do need a short little break just to relieve myself.
All right. Well, then we will be back after the break with the discussion of Stanley Kubrick films.
Yeah, I'm going to go pee.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Delicious things to eat.
The popcorn can't be beat. The sparkling drinks are just dandy. The chocolate bars and the candy. So let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
All right, I guess we're back. That was a lovely little break. Hopefully Pete put a little sounder in there that tells you how to find us and whatnot.
Oh, yeah. Well, definitely something. Or,
now I've committed him to something he didn't want to do.
Damn it.
So we're going to do our director's spotlight bit. This is a new thing that we've decided to give a try. And we're doing Stanley Kubrick, who is no longer with us, but has made some really fine films. I myself am doing Full Metal Jacket. Pete is watching A Clockwork Orange. Jared watched 2001: A Space Odyssey, and Kevin got lucky with Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying About the Bomb, I think is the full title.
Yep.
So we'll start with Kevin and his big long title.
Yeah, I had never seen it, so my Kubrick history, I think, is literally all the movies you guys watched plus The Shining, and I think that was about it. And Full Metal Jacket's been decades for me. 2001's been decades for me. Shit, I think even Clockwork Orange has probably been 20 years. But I'd never seen Dr. Strangelove. And actually, beyond hearing the title, I didn't even know what it was about. But this one, knowing the rest of Kubrick's work, it feels like such an outlier from everything else he's ever done.
Yeah.
Because it's a 60s film, I think.
64. 61.
Yeah.
64. Sorry. 64.
Yeah. But shot in black and white, takes place during the height of the Cold War, and is far more lighthearted than I expected. Like, I should have known looking at the posters that it was a little crazy, but man, there's a lot of funny shit that happens in this movie. Like, it is almost like the anti-Kubrick film that he made himself. Like, knowing everything else that he's made, like, it's funny, but kind of a little dark in its humor anyways. And the basic premise is that we're in this Cold War with Russia. At this time during the Cold War, we've got bombers with nukes flying outside of Russia basically at all times. Like, we're ready for somebody to hit the button and for things to go down. And so one general decides, you know what, fuck it. He's like, let's just do this and get it over with. And calls a bombing run. And the protocols behind this particular bombing run are that nobody on the run can check in after X amount of time, for fear that, maybe the Russians would hear about it, intercept their transmissions, and then call it off or whatever. And so he takes advantage of this protocol and sets everything in motion that we're going to start dropping bombs. And then it's all about like this frantic, on the other side of it, this frantic political movement between the rest of the world. They'll be like, hey, we're not doing this on purpose. We're trying to stop this. And it's just, it's a trippy movie. And it's actually more than maybe any other Kubrick movie, one that I could watch probably again and again, because it's not heavy. Like, it doesn't just fucking beat you over the head with some depressing shit, right? And there's some hilarious lines in there, like when we were in the middle of all this, and like the U.S. general's wife calls him to bitch about dinner or something like that. I can't even remember what she was complaining about.
It's his girlfriend.
Yeah,
he's
that's
like,
right.
Yes, baby, I love you. But he answers the phone and he says, I told you never to call me here.
It's so crazy. And it's just like, it just has so many moments, and it's got some great actors in it. You got George C. Scott, you got James Earl Jones.
Yep. Slim
you know,
Pickens as the pilot.
Yeah. It's just, I know that when I watched it, and I happened to watch it at a time I was super tired. So there's a few minutes in the middle where I was kind of dozing off, and that's not a critique of the movie. I am at night often very tired. I fall asleep during a lot of good television and movies, so I can't blame the films in a lot of cases. But I really enjoyed this more, I think, for different reasons that I've enjoyed, other Kubrick films. Like I do love Clockwork Orange, but it's a crazy psychotic fucking film. Whereas this movie, this feels more like a regular film than anything else Kubrick has probably done. But it was cool. Like, I dug it. I dug the style of it. A little campier, black and white. And yeah, it was good. Like I said, I would watch this again right away.
Just because you mentioned, George C. Scott's girlfriend, there's a scene in the beginning where it's just kind of like a montage, and it's showing all the guys who were in the bomber who end up being in the bomber that James Earl Jones is in. And I think it's Slim Pickens, or maybe it's the radio operator, but one of them is looking at a Playboy, and there's a picture of the centerfold. That centerfold is of George C. Scott's girlfriend who calls him. It's that girl laid out.
That's awesome.
There's some really interesting stuff in this film, though. It's like, so the Russians in real life built this bomb called the Tsar bomb, right? It was the largest kiloton nuclear device ever created, which was actually detonated in 1961 and was referred to in military circles, or like the top secret echelons of the intelligence industry, as the doomsday device. And it's interesting. I wonder how much impact that had. Like, if there was somebody, because Hollywood and the military has always kind of been a little flirty with each other. I almost wonder if that news somehow like disseminated down into something that became this movie. Because this movie is based on a book that was actually written in the late 50s.
Oh, okay.
But I almost wonder if that real world circumstance had some impact on some of the plot devices that end up in this movie. I always found that really interesting.
Yeah, I would bet it does. I mean, for all of the ridiculousness of it, it really did have a feel of like something that could have happened at some point during the Cold War. Like, you just see that somebody could have snapped, or something could have gone sideways. There's a real life story
of a nuclear attack that has no way of being called back. You know what I mean? Like, it's literally built into the system, like, not to be able to be called back, which is like the one thing you would think you absolutely want built into like a preemptive or a first strike policy.
Yeah.
The whole thing is just satire it's such a good parody of the sort of mechanizations of war. It really, I think it's genius. And Peter Sellers playing three different characters is incredible.
Well, it reminds you how good Peter Sellers is, because you always think about, you get Peter Sellers and you always think about, Pink Panther. But when you see some of the other stuff that he's done, you're like, holy fuck, this dude was an amazing actor. Like,
and the character name of the general who launches the strike is Jack D. Ripper.
Yeah.
Jack the Ripper. Which is not even a thinly veiled.
Hilarious.
Just absolutely a riot.
Yeah. But I think too, there's around this, I think maybe it was after this, but there's some true stories about how close we came to nuclear war with Russia, between people getting mixed signals,
or the atomic bomb.
But between people getting the mixed signals in our own government and being that close to hitting the button, and then it might have been the early 2000s, must have been the early 2000s. There was a black and white film that George Clooney did.
That was a remake. Of a film from the 60s called Failsafe, right? Yeah.
But it kind of the same premise, right? Like we mistakenly.
Actually, there was a. So Stanley Kubrick actually sued the guy who wrote the book that Dr. Strangelove is based on. Helped Kubrick write the screenplay along with a satirical comedian for Dr. Strangelove. One of the I think the same production company that made Dr. Strangelove also bought the rights to this other book, and Kubrick actually sued them because he didn't want that other book's movie to be made and come out first because he thought it would hurt ticket sales for Dr. Strangelove. There's a whole lot of weird, like, inside Hollywood stuff that happened around those two novels.
Yeah.
But
it was cool. Yeah. It seems like Kubrick's around that shit a lot.
Yeah.
I think he probably was not the easiest person to be around or work with.
Yes.
No, I think that's...
Ask Shelley Duvall.
Yeah.
Oh, isn't there... Yeah, didn't he make her life like a living... Or she broke down or something on The Shining?
Yeah. Yeah, he tortured her on The Shining. Like, he was not a good person.
Yeah,
he would not survive the Me Too movement.
Yeah, no, he was a notoriously difficult director. He was like that poster child of like the tortured genius that you get, where he was such an asshole, but this is
what he put out
get.
was good, so good that
Well, all right, Pete, why don't you go ahead and talk about your film?
Clockwork Orange, 1971, based on a novel from 1962. I have not watched this movie in 30 years. Like, I was like 14, 15 when I saw it. I was about my daughter's age, because it was like, ooh, Clockwork Orange, this is cool. It's it's subversive kind of thing. And I remember watching it and finding it disturbing, because at the age I saw it, I hadn't seen anything depicted like that on screen, really. Like there is and it was some of it, interestingly enough, I found out in just reading up on it a little bit, when they released it in America originally, it got an X rating.
I believe
and
that.
They had to cut
that is not
like
surprising.
30 seconds. He had to cut 30 seconds of incredibly sexually explicit material out of the movie so that it could get that R rating. And so I watch it, and it's short synopsis. It's basically this psychotic person, Alex. It's a very dystopian, 1984 kind of world that we live in. There's this like hyper oppressive government. The setting it's obviously very like post 60s, end of psychedelia kind of view. Like it very much has like a Pink Floyd The Wall kind of feel to it, the way they like put some of it together. But like they're in like the bar, and all the decorations are these very like bubbly, fantastic-y, futuristic things, but how you'd think they were in the future from the 60s. Like it was very like big ball-shaped furniture, these fluffy weird couches. Yeah. it's basically so there's this guy Alex, and he's got this little crew. They call themselves Droogs, and they basically run around doing what they call ultraviolence. It's time for a bit of the ultraviolence, and in the beginning, like there's a very graphic, violent rape of this woman while this guy's watching. It is probably, looking back now, one of the most violent films I have ever watched without being on a grand scope. Like you think about like the violence in Saving Private Ryan in the beginning. The first 10 minutes of that movie, it's so hard to watch because of the way they filmed it and everything else. Ridiculously violent. The violence in this movie, because of the way Malcolm McDowell does some of this stuff, is so much worse. Like when he's beating this dude and singing in the rain, and just the shots he's taking with the cane and kicking him. Like, I'm watching it, and like you hear the thuds, and you're like, oh my God, like this is so out there. And so eventually he gets caught. They sentence him to this rehabilitation thing, and I never knew this. This was actually one of the interesting things. If you remember the Welcome to the Jungle video, they have that whole thing where they've got his eyes propped open.
Where he's strapped to the chair.
I forget the therapy had like a weird name based on the scientist they gave. And they took that obviously directly from this movie because that was part of this therapy, this like, aberrant behaviorist therapy that they do. And so they cure Alex, and he goes, and they try to, to prove that he's cured, they try to entice him to attack someone and to do some other stuff, and he doesn't fall for it. But then they've taken him so far out of this violent tendency that he had that he winds up getting his ass beat ridiculously by some random people, and then he goes and he winds up getting arrested, and the guys that arrest him are his two buddies that he used to go around and beat the shit out of people with. They're now cops, and so they beat the shit out of him and leave him for dead. And he's found by this guy in a wheelchair, who is the guy whose wife he raped in front of him, and then beat this guy to the point where the guy's now in a wheelchair. And the guy helps him. He eventually finds out about it. Alex gets, I forgot exactly what happened with it at the end there, because it hit a point where I'm following it along, but this movie really was, and I don't get disturbed by stuff very, very easily, but I now remember why I only needed to watch this movie once when I was younger. Like, this is, unless you're one of those special kind of people, this is not a watch multiple times kind of movie, or, the kind of movie that you're gonna, oh, you know what, I feel like watching Clockwork Orange tonight. It's there's a lot of deep kind of discussion on, how this behaviorist therapy and how it works, and it's like all of Kubrick's stuff. So, what year was The Shining? Because The Shining was in the early 70s too.
No, I thought
it's
in the 80s.
Was it
like,
Shining?
I thought it was like 79. Is it?
Like,
no, it has to be. Yeah, it's got to be 80 because The Shining didn't even come out until the book didn't even come out to 79. I don't think, because The Shining was his third book.
1980.
1980. Okay.
Yeah, because book-wise it was Carrie, then Salem's Lot, and then The Shining.
Stanley Kubrick loves, and I'm going to move my head so you can see right there, with Malcolm McDowell when they're in a bar drinking spiked milk.
Yeah.
Okay. He loves, and it's one of those things that you see in Full Metal Jacket and in The Shining. He loves somebody looking creepy and psychotic and holding a long, slow zoom onto their face, and then a short cut to another character, and then back into that zoom. And I don't know if it's just the actors he gets, or if how he gets it out of them. But Malcolm McDowell in this movie is, especially like the first half, because he's rehabilitated and whatnot. He is easily one of the most evilly villainous characters ever on screen. Like, he is psychotic without a care. Like, it's not even a killer thing. It's just this complete lack of empathy, sociopathic, like, I'm just going to do whatever I want. And it's like I said, it takes a lot to disturb me. And watching this now for the second time, and it's like I said, in 30 years, it's a freaky movie. Like I remember putting this on like list of movies that I have to make sure my daughter watches, just because I remember watching it when I was young and the impression that it made. And
you
now
move that to a much further down the list.
I'm like, just take. She can come to this one on her own. I'm not going to push this one on her. She can, if she ever wants to watch that, she can. But for all of everything I've just said about how disturbing it is, it's a great movie. Like, it's got a lot to say. It is filmed beautifully. But God, it's a mind fuck. You know, because in the end, they wind up he winds up being unfixed, and so now you've got this guy who's going back to being a psychotic in the end, and it just, you only need to see it once though. At least in my opinion, it's not a repeat view kind of movie. It's a phenomenal fucking movie, but it's so harsh. Like, I remember there's very few scenes, especially like graphic sexual scenes from regular movies, that stick in my head. And you've got Jodie Foster on the pinball machine from The Accused, or was it Witness? No, yeah, from The Accused. And then you've got like him raping this guy's wife in front of him and like taking breaks to beat the dude and then go back to raping his wife. That it's just so out there that you're like, I can't believe this is actually, like, somebody put this on film. And, you know,
it is a movie that would, if there was a film like that made today, it would be like Lars von Trier, who made Nymphomaniac, or someone. Like, it would be European.
Yeah.
You
Totally.
would not get an American production like Paramount or TriStar or Disney is not making that movie today.
No.
It's just like there's not a chance in hell that's made in a domestic sense anymore at all.
Yeah. It's because, you know, aside from that, like I said, the comparisons, like, I compared it almost in some ways to, you know, Pink Floyd's The Wall and just the way it was filmed and some of that. It's out there like that. Like, there's stuff that happens in this movie that serves no point to the plot whatsoever, other than just to be there. Like, they you know, like, they'll cut back occasionally to when they're in the bar drinking the milk with no reason. Like, there's no like point into that little cut, like, oh, this is when we were formulating this idea, or this is when this happened. It's just fucking there, and you get like 30 seconds of them just sitting there, and, you know, the music's playing over it, and you're like, the fuck is that for, other than to just be weird and creepy. And it works.
It's like a world building moment.
One of those weird things. One of the things. First of all, I have to say, I like Pete. I mean, I saw it. I think as a teenager, and then I'm pretty sure I watched it somewhere in the mid or late 90s. You know, probably somebody had it on like after a rave or something, because that would make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And I really did not enjoy watching this movie. Like, as a 45-year-old man, like, it really. I think, especially because of what we've experienced recently socially, it made me feel so uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, you can make the argument that all great art should do that. And I'm, you know, a believer in that, but I don't know. I just, as I was watching it, I really just thought, like Pete said, this is a movie I never need to watch again. You know, I'll probably see Strangelove again, probably see Full Metal Jacket again. Definitely I'll see 2001 again. I know that. But really never need to see Clockwork ever again.
Yeah.
It just is so disturbing and unnerving on so many levels. It physically made me just feel like
you feel icky.
I did. I just felt like I had to keep adjusting the way I was sitting because I was just like, oh God. Checking the time thing, like, oh good, there's only 28 minutes left. Oh good, there's only 15 minutes left. Oh good, there's ugh.
Yeah, it's just, and that's the weird part about this movie is that it is, though, a phenomenal movie. It's shot so fucking well. It's paced perfectly. Like it has points where you're like, oh, it's starting to lull oh no, it's not. Here we go. Right there. But that lull puts you down just enough that when it brings you back up, you're like, oh, look, he just smashed that dude's fucking head. Okay. And
there are almost some comedic moments in it, which is almost hard to fathom considering the whole scope of the movie.
That's the thing. Like, exactly. I've got an incredibly dark sense of humor with a lot of stuff, and it takes a lot to, if you will, offend or disturb me, like a whole lot. And this did it. Like, it just, and I think obviously that is what it's meant to do.
Right.
It is obviously meant to be a disturbing movie. Like, there's no way it's not.
Yeah, it didn't get made, and then Kubrick was like, oh, you thought that was weird?
Yeah.
Like, it's like, oh, fuck, man, I thought this was going to be a family. Like, it's just not that movie.
Yeah, but it is just, if you see it once, don't need to revisit it. Like, your initial reaction to this movie will stick with you for 30 years.
Yeah, because I saw it in college, and the only thing I remember other than the eyes being held open, that scene was like super burned into my brain. Yeah. And then beating a guy with a cane, I remember that.
That's the singing in the rain scene.
I remember those two things visually, and then other than that, I just remember being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I remember about the film. And now I'm like intrigued that you guys made it sound awful, but I kind of want to watch it again. I know I probably won't. Because one of my favorite films was...
It's weird because it's a brilliant kind of awful, right?
Yeah.
Like it's horrible. And yeah, nobody should watch it more than once. But at the same time...
You should watch it.
It's a good
movie.
It's just...
If you're trying to study film, it is not a movie that should be skipped.
Yeah.
But if you just are like in the mood and you kind of want to watch like quote unquote a trippy movie, it might not be the one to go to because you might be in a very strange headspace afterwards, and that might not be the thing you were looking for at the beginning. Yeah. It's
Well,
good pick, Pete.
Yeah.
good pick.
Let's talk about 2001, arguably the first best sci-fi film.
Interesting you should say that because I think I said almost those same exact words to Kevin and Pete 2 weeks ago. So really, if you look at the history of sci-fi, there's a French director who made a silent film called A Trip to the Moon, which came out in 1902. Georges Méliès, I think. If someone sees this who's French and I butchered the name, apologies. I'm American.
Don't worry, nobody's going to see or hear this.
Okay, okay, good. So there's that film. Then in 1927, Fritz Lang made Metropolis, which is a black and white film, which is epic and it's beautiful, and any sci-fi fan should see it. Fast forward about another quarter century, you get the original The Day the Earth Stood Still in 1951. Black and white movie. It's almost kind of a B movie, but it's pretty important. It's hailed as a very important smart science fiction movie of the 50s. Basically, all the other science fiction films that were made in between 1902 from A Trip to the Moon and 2001 in 1968 are like trash B or C rate movies. Science fiction was not taken seriously at all, was not thought as a way to make a serious movie or to do social commentary or to say anything on screen that was going to make money at all. It was pretty much the laughing stock of cinema. So in 1964, Stanley Kubrick basically calls up Arthur C. Clarke, who was a famous science fiction writer, creator of the communication satellite, and basically said, I want to make the proverbial good science fiction movie. So for 4 years, they worked on a story together. That story became 2001. This is not a movie for everybody. It's 2 hours and 19 minutes long. There are
feels like
217 years is how long it feels like. There are less than 40 minutes of spoken dialogue in the movie, in a movie that's almost 2.5 hours long.
Show don't tell.
Yeah. There is literally almost no exposition in the movie at all. There's basically nothing that tells you what this story is about. Like if you watch the last Avengers movie 4 or 5 different times in the movie, they tell you broken timelines. Here's what we have to fix. This is why it happened. It's we have no attention span these days, so they're trying to keep the audience engaged. 2001 has none of that. It literally starts out, the first sequence of the movie is called The Dawn of Man. You basically see
famous
like
scene.
Australopithecus era primates, essentially, in the what I'm assuming is supposed to be the cradle of civilization, so basically the African savannah. And there's a group of primates. You see them sort of huddled together sleeping. They're gathered around a water hole. One of them gets attacked by a cheetah, and it's essentially telling you that the beginnings of man basically were at the whim of nature. That's the whole point of the first section of the movie. And then this monolith, the famous monolith, appears one day. They wake up and it's sitting there. They don't know what to do about it. They scream at it. They crowd around it. One of them, who's called Moonwatcher, this specific primate, reaches out and touches it. They all calm down. They all start kind of touching it. And you would have to think at that time, no creature had ever touched something completely smooth, right? Because there's nothing that exists in nature except maybe frozen water that's kind of smooth in that way. So that alone was like a new tactile experience for humanity. After that scene, this same primate is kind of walking amongst these bones of a creature that's been killed, and grabs one of the bones and just starts playing with it, kind of knocking around the other bones, sort of realizes, wait a minute. Wait, these are breaking. Like I'm using this thing and it's breaking these bones. And it's essentially, the weaponizing, using a tool as a weapon. This incredible moment of human evolution is realizing, if I can break, I know these bones come from inside something that died.
Boom, boom,
and I can break
boom,
these
boom,
bones. Boom. And you hear, Strauss's famous music, Spark, whatever it's called. I have it written down. I'll get to that in a minute. But anyways, so then what you see is this crowd, his sort of crew of primates, and they're eating well and they're protected and they can defend their water hole because they have tools. So in a following scene, he throws up this bone and immediately there's just a smash cut, which is supposed to match the bone flying through the air, and it goes to this satellite orbiting Earth millions of years later. That's, the first scene I think is roughly 20 to maybe 10, 15 minutes. So smash cut, you're in orbit of Earth. This thing, which they don't tell you in the movie, but it's actually a satellite that's a orbiting nuclear platform. So the inference is that it goes from the first weapon man ever had to the most recent weapon that man has. That's kind of the connecting thread through the shot. So you get now the second section of this movie where there's this Dr. Haywood Floyd. He's traveling from Earth up to the moon to a space station, and you don't really know why, except he meets a group of Russians. They talk about, there's something going on at this Tycho monolith, or this Tycho, which is a famous crater on the moon. We weren't allowed to land there. They say there's some kind of like virus. Do we need to worry about it? He's like, can't really talk about it. Not at liberty to talk about it. He goes to a meeting on the space station, you find out that man has discovered for the first time that there is some sort of sign of intelligent life. And what they found is in this crater Tycho, the same monolith that you had seen in the Dawn of Man section of the movie. So they've dug a hole and they find this thing. They find out it was buried 4 million years ago. They don't know what it is. So he lands on the moon. They have a meeting. He talks about, thanks everybody for keeping the cover story, kosher. Obviously we don't know what this thing is. We don't want word to get out. We're going to, I'm going to go down, take a look at it. So he gets a crew of people together. They go down to the monolith, and in an interesting shot that parallels the Dawn of Man scene, you have these modern humans in spacesuits, and they're carefully approaching this monolith in a rocky environment, and sort of tepidly they walk up and they kind of put their hand to it and start feeling it, which is exactly what the primates did. So immediately when they do that, they all get together to take a picture, and they hear this incredibly loud screaming sound. And it's essentially the monolith is sending a radio frequency burst to, in the book 2001, it's Saturn. In the movie, it's Jupiter, but far out in the solar system. So basically that scene ends, smash cut again, to now it's 18 months later, you get these 2 astronauts who are on a spaceship. They're headed to Jupiter to try to find out what this is all about. They also have a computer on board that's running everything. It's called the HAL 9000. It's basically Surrey in outer space. Basically, it runs the ship. It takes care of all the diagnostic stuff. There's a crew in hibernation. It's making sure they're taken care of. So at some point, the computer says, hey, there's something wrong with a part of the ship. Astronauts are like, okay, we'll go out and take care of it. They go out, they bring in the piece that's broken. Lo and behold, they can't find anything wrong with it. And allegedly, this computer system has a history of totally being infallible. It's never made a mistake ever in the history of it existing. It's all a little weird. So he's like, the computer says, well, maybe we should put it back in, and then when it fails, it'll be easier to find out what's wrong with it. So the astronauts are like, okay. So the astronaut, Frank Poole, goes out to fix it, and the AI system essentially kills him in space and gets rid of him. So the other astronaut, Dave Bowman, goes out, looks at him, gets in a pod, goes out, tracks him down in space, just sees that his air hose, his oxygen hose has been essentially cut. And then the computer doesn't want to let Dave Bowman back in. So he's kind of got to go MacGyver and jettison himself through the emergency hatch to get back into the ship. And that's kind of like the third section of the movie. So he goes inside, he basically undoes all of Hal's memory circuits. Hal goes nuts, kind of just starts going like, I'm losing my mind. I can feel myself. I'm losing my mind. And then outside the spaceship, Dave Bowman sees a monolith. This thing just keeps appearing at certain points of humanity's existence. So he hops back in a pod. He goes out to the monolith. He gets close to it. And then there's this famous sequence that happens that they actually called the Stargate. And he flies through the sequence. It's very trippy. It's very late 60s, psychedelic looking. That happens. And then you see this series of images, which are essentially what I think they are, is whatever the monolith is or is a servant of is essentially showing Dave Bowman the creation of the universe, from like the Big Bang to the creation of galaxies and rocky planets and all this stuff. Smash cut again. All of a sudden, Dave Bowman is in what looks like a Victorian hotel suite. It's all very weird. The space pod is there. He's walking around. He sees an image of himself, although it's slightly aged, follows him into another room, and then it's like smash cut again. Dave Bowman is now 20 years older, and he's sitting at a table eating breakfast. A few minutes go by. He knocks a glass off the table. It's all very weird. Smash cut again. All of a sudden, Dave's 80 or 90 years old, and he's sitting in bed, and he sits up slightly, and in front of the bed is the monolith again. And just like had happened previously, he sort of reaches out towards it, And then you see maybe some of the strangest images ever in cinematic history. Smash cut to the Earth, and you're kind of outside the Earth, and there's this child within what looks like kind of a bubble or an egg, and it's rotating towards the Earth. That's the end of the movie. So, like, what's the point of the whole movie? The whole point of the whole movie is, as I see it, is basically the evolution of the human species. And the monolith is there at these seminal moments of evolution. It's like, imagine when the apes found the first monolith, whatever controls the monolith said, oh, okay, they've made this leap now to use tools. So why don't we bury one of these things on the moon? So when they become a spacefaring species, they'll probably have the technology to find it and we'll know. And then it sends a thing to Jupiter, where humanity then goes to it, and Dave finds it in a hotel room. And then I think what happens is the monolith essentially ages Dave, so he understands the entire spectrum of like a human lifetime experience. And then when he dies, it turns Dave into the star child, the star baby that is floating outside Earth, which is supposed to be like now the next step of human evolution. Who knows? But interestingly, that piece of music that Pete referenced, which is called Also Sprach Zarathustra, which was written by Richard Strauss, is actually inspired by a novel by Friedrich Nietzsche that had the same name. And the point of that novel is essentially the idea of the Ubermensch, or the Superman, or the super being. So like, it's not just a random piece of music. It literally is almost telling you at the very beginning, this is where the movie is going to end up, which is kind of genius, because I didn't even know that until I just looked it up after I watched the movie. But I just think it's just the seminal science fiction film. I mean, it 50 plus years later, on the AFI Top 100 list, it's the #1 sci-fi film of all time and the number 15 overall American film of all time. And for a science fiction film that's that kind of odd, it is saying something. I just think it's a phenomenal piece. There's also so much odd camera work in it that really makes you wonder how they did that 50 plus years ago, because now you would just say it's CGI. But the way that it's shot is really phenomenal. There's a scene where a stewardess kind of walks around. I mean, you'd have to see it. The camera's in place the whole time, like straight, and she walks around a corridor and then out a door that goes like that way. It's pretty insane. But if it's a movie that somebody could sit through to get through it, visually it's stunning. It's a great movie.
Yeah, I saw this one again in college, and I did not get it at the time, and I hated it. And it felt like that light show at the end went on for 2 hours, and it was just so rough. And I've been wanting to watch it again, and I think this has inspired me to do it.
It's on HBO Max. If you
everyone says, I have actually a whole Kubrick box set that my wife spent, $1 million on back in the day. At a Suncoast video store.
Wow. That takes me back.
So I have all of these films, so that part's I think I need to watch it again.
I will say the first time I saw it, I definitely didn't understand it. I watched it with my dad, I think on a PBS showing when I was maybe like 8 or 9 years old.
Yeah.
So you can imagine that what it was trying to say to me was completely lost. I just thought it was so cool because it was in space,
I liked it. I remember liking it. I remember being impressed visually by it.
I remember the same.
I just remember how goddamn long it felt. Kubrick, to his credit, and I can't speak on Strangelove to this, but even in Clockwork Orange, the man is not afraid of on-screen silence at all.
No.
Like he's like, fuck it, 5 minutes of no sound whatsoever except for the slight hissing static noise of being in space.
I think part of that was that I think he wanted audiences to infer. I don't think he wanted to tell stories where he was just like vomiting out to you, this is what you're supposed to be getting from this.
Yeah,
I kind of think he wanted it to be interpretive for everyone so that you could see a different movie depending on who you were, even though you were seeing the same images.
That makes sense. I can see that.
Yeah.
Well, I guess then I will round it out with Full Metal Jacket. I watched this about a week ago because we were going to record last week and it didn't work out. And so I watched it with my wife, and this is definitely a movie that could not be made nowadays.
Sure.
No holds barred. It is racist, misogynistic, homophobic. If it's something you can't do nowadays, they did it loudly in this film.
And it's not that old.
No, 87.
Yeah.
But it was made at the time, and it was meant to be this. It was meant to be offensive. It was meant to really rub your nose in how shitty all of this was. Like was stated, I don't think it was on the podcast. I think it was when we were pre-gaming. The movie's essentially got two halves. The first half is them in boot camp, and then the second half is them in Vietnam. And it's not even all of them. It really focuses on Joker, who is Matthew Modine's character. And so there's a whole collection of them in boot camp. And then once they get to Vietnam, it follows Joker and others show up along the way, but you also get additional characters there as well. I mean, it's brutal and uncomfortable and funny as fuck.
Yeah.
There's so much that's funny in this movie. They just nail it. It's just a damn fine film. It's really hard to suggest, like, this is one I would have thought I was like, oh, my daughter should watch this, but I don't think she could. I think if she watched it, she'd be so offended. I mean, just the, sucky, me love you long time. Like, it's so like cliche at this point, but this is the movie it came from, right? And
give it to me.
Horribly offensive.
Don't do that again.
And
no, because that's
only gotten more offensive over time.
So I hadn't seen this movie before I had heard "Me So Horny."
Yeah.
So I had no idea where that was from, and I heard it, and then I see this movie as a teenager after that song comes out, and all of a sudden I'm like, "Oh, holy shit! That's where they lifted that fucking sample."
Yeah.
And you watch it, and it is. Wow, racist and misogynistic doesn't even begin to kind of touch that.
No, and it's brutal. I mean, when they get to Vietnam, they are pulling no punches.
Oh yeah,
they are
the whole sniper sequence towards the end.
Oh yeah,
yeah,
oh yeah, and it's beautifully shot. It's fantastically acted. Vincent D'Onofrio is amazing as Pyle.
Yeah.
Everything with Pyle is amazing, and I think, like with a lot of Kubrick stuff, this one deals heavily with mental issues.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
But, I mean, we don't even need to. It's pretty obvious in yours, Pete.
Yeah.
You see the computer goes crazy in 2001.
Well, I mean, I would argue that Strangelove. I mean, the Jack D. Ripper.
Yeah,
he's having a bit of a break himself.
Some mental issues, right? And then in the first half of the film, you slowly watch Pyle go crazy, and in the second half,
it's coming too.
What?
It's coming too, which makes it almost like you can see that like this is not going to end well for someone.
No, you can. It's real. They are telegraphing it all, and you're watching, and it's so uncomfortable. And when it happens, you're just like, "Well, I knew." I mean, it's horrible, but at the same time, you're like, "Well, I just saw that coming a mile away." And then the second half of the film is about watching Joker go crazy, and he's, by the time you get to him, he's hardened. He's seen stuff. There's not much. He seems like it's all just going to slide right off of him. He's going to be fine. He's going to be fine. But then at the end of the film, when he has to be the one to put down the young girl sniper, and you can just see the light go out in his eyes when he does it, and
the 1,000-yard stare.
Yeah, that's
they talk about earlier.
Yeah, it's that funny thing because he makes it sound like he was in the shit, like when they're sitting there talking about where they go, and Rafter Man wants to get in there and get some shots in, and he's like, man, you haven't been in the shit, you haven't got the stare, this and that, and you kind of come to realize as things, when they first come under fire. Matthew Modine was probably, the character Joker's probably bullshitting a little bit and putting a little bit much on how much he was actually in. That scene, that whole ending scene. Like I said, I watched this movie. I fucking love this movie. I watch it about once a month.
It's a great. It's a hard movie to watch, but it's a great movie.
From the minute that cowboy gets shot and it goes down, the hair on my arm stands up and it starts to build this tension all the way through with Animal Mother and everybody else until he shoots that girl. And then it cuts to the end, and in this weirdly bizarre, strange way, these soldiers hiking through this like dimly lit battlefield of this bombed out looking city.
That's one of the best shots in movie history. That tracking shot with the buildings on fire in the background.
Yeah, with them singing the Mickey Mouse Club theme song somehow in this weird way, and I don't understand it, but every time it somehow cleanses everything that you've just watched in the last 2 hours and almost makes it okay. And I don't know why. I don't know how that device works in my brain, but I'm disturbed every time I watch the movie. At the end there, the music when the girl's looking at Joker and he's deciding what he's gonna do, it still gets me. But they sing the Mickey Mouse Club theme song, and I'm cool at the end. Like the credits roll, and I'm like, all right.
They do such a great job because the character of Animal Mother is so unstable.
Oh yeah,
you're never quite sure whether he's safe or not.
Yeah,
like there are multiple times where you're thinking, oh my god, he could just turn and shoot one of his own guys. Like he's that close to breaking. And it was cool to see Adam Baldwin. I didn't realize that it was him in the film. And he does a great job of being a total psychotic nut job.
He has been around for so much longer than you remember because he's such a great character actor, but he steals scenes that he's in and you forget that he's been around. Like I remember the first time I ever saw him was in a movie from the late 70s called My Bodyguard, where he plays this kid's bodyguard, and I didn't even, and in subsequent like going on to the future and seeing him in other stuff, I'm like, oh my god, that's that dude. And I go back and watch it, and then you see him in something else, and you're like, holy shit, because you see him in, you see him then again in terms of big films that he's done. You see him in friggin' Independence Day as the Air Force officer, and you're like, oh holy shit, it's fucking Animal Mother, and then all of a sudden it's Serenity and Firefly, that he's in, and he's been around doing stuff for the longest time, and he's one of those actors you forget about with stuff
when they were rolling the credits in the beginning and I saw his name, I was like, oh shit, he's in this movie. I was like, gee, god, how long has he been around for? But also I thought the movie was older than it was. I didn't realize it was made in 87 until after we finished it. Also I noticed throughout the film, visually, this film stylistically is very similar to at least the first half, very similar to the Shining. Same
camera
kind
moves,
of patterns,
the frames,
same color palette, same framing. It was weird watching it. I was like, oh shit, there's so much Shining in this. It's just like it's really bleeding through. So that was also interesting to note. But I enjoyed going back and watching an old Kubrick film. It was a nice little taste of something different. And
it is kind of interesting to think that movie came out the same year Predator came out.
Yeah,
and it does. It's funny that you said that because it doesn't feel like a movie made in 1987. It feels like a movie made in 1975.
Yeah. Yeah, it feels like a much older film than it is.
Yeah.
And I think it's probably because of the way it was shot at the same, it's meant to look older and grittier. And, they're definitely, if you look, the film quality of the photos behind Pete and Kevin are a much higher quality. This was a very grainy film. It's washed out. It's shot in a style reminiscent of all of those films. You can see that they could shoot, much cleaner film at the time. Pete's about wetting himself. What's so funny?
Nothing. I got a funny text.
Some of the stuff that Arlie Ermy, who plays the I don't know if he was a gunnery sergeant or a master sergeant, but some of the stuff that he says when he is berating the cadets is just, you wish, I found myself laughing and I wish I had the ability to shit talk my friends the way that Arlie Ermy is talking to them. He says something about your mother wasted something when the best part of you dripped down her butt crack or something. He says, and I was like, oh my god, that is epic.
When you listen through there's so many classic, things that the scenes copied and his character's been copied, ad nauseum since this film came out.
Yeah.
But the shit talking in this, all of that stuff, like I said, this movie is funny. This movie is really funny. And you're laughing at it and you feel very uncomfortable laughing at it because what is being said is not pleasant.
No.
But it's still really funny.
Yeah, I fucking love this movie. I always found, especially from this time period, people kind of fell into two schools because there were a lot of Vietnam movies being made, through this 80s period, and I always felt
Platoon and
you always fell into two schools. You were either a Platoon person or you were a Full Metal Jacket person. And Platoon was almost it was the Brat Pack makes a Vietnam movie because you got Charlie Sheen's in there, and John C. McGinley, and was really young. You don't even realize how young he is watching Platoon.
Willem Dafoe, right?
Yeah.
Is it Michael J. Fox and Sean Penn too?
No, that's two other movies. Oh God, those.
Am I starting to mix all my? Okay.
That's again made in that kind of 80s time period, but
Gotcha.
I always liked this one so much more, just because this
one feels honest.
Yeah. Yeah, whether it is or isn't, I feel and I always felt like the characters were very grounded in reality. Whereas in Platoon, all right, I get where you're going with all this, but it seemed a little too fantastical.
Platoon was an Oliver Stone film, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
You buy into everything in Full Metal Jacket. And, like I was saying, that cut back and forth as Joker's staring into that girl's eyes. And,
the girl keeps saying, kill me, kill me.
Yeah. And then she's praying before that.
Yeah.
Which makes it that much more. You're just like, oh, man.
Yeah.
And, just his whole thing with the natural born killer thing. And, when that general or the colonel or whoever it is sees him, with the
duality of man, sir.
It's just
the what? Yeah, the what?
It's that is one, like I said, at least once a month, and mostly just because it's always on some sort of fucking movie channel, and I'm like, oh sweet, it's only 10 minutes in, I'm good to go. And
the other thing from there, that we didn't touch on, which I tend to be, I'm a really musically obsessive person, was the way that Kubrick would use music. in all of these films, that was one of the things that jumped out most at me, particularly in Strangelove. At the very beginning, and I can't remember offhand what piece of music it is, but the first shot after the disclaimer rolls is of a midair refueling of a B-52, and there's music playing, and it literally looks like a dance. I mean, it's so kind of, you don't really pick up on it because it seems so natural. And then, like in Clockwork, you've got the way that Alex loves Beethoven's Ninth.
Yeah.
That
being his trigger
theme,
at the end. Yeah.
That is a theme that runs through the whole movie. And then in 2001, obviously you've got the Strauss piece, which you know, dum 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 bum bum. And then like Pete said, the movie ends with the Mickey Mouse Club in theme in Full Metal Jacket.
The music all the way through Full Metal Jacket's amazing, and all of the various marching rhymes that they go through are fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, everything they do with music and sound in this film is impeccable.
Yeah. And that was one of the things that really, really jumped out at me, was the way that he would use, I mean, today, like a soundtrack is like kind of a marketing tool of a movie. It's like a big selling point, right? It's a way to generate revenue. But it seemed like, especially if you go back to Strangelove or 2001, that wasn't really a thing. But yet the music is so pivotal in those movies. I mean, if you took out the music, the film would lose something substantial to it.
Kubrick has always seemed like a director, and it runs through all these movies that it's kind of rare that I really feel like he had a huge input and say on the structure of all the movies, or all the music in his films.
If you look at his filmography, you see huge gaps between, because he worked on a single project for a very long time and had his hand in every aspect of it.
And that's
I did notice that the original music in Full Metal Jacket was written by his daughter.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Abigail
Kubrick?
No, I think it's like Mead or something, or Metal, something along those lines. But I was interested because I there's a lot of stuff. How you were saying the shots, David, reminded you so much of The Shining, and some of the sort of organ kind of electronic synthesizer music that's in that really reminded me of The Shining too.
Yeah, I think it was, if I remember correctly, it was the most recent film he just finished. So he finished The Shining and then he began production on this, if I'm correct.
So that's like a 7-year gap.
Yeah.
And then what? And then is it Eyes Wide Shut?
I think it's Eyes Wide Shut after Full Metal Jacket.
Years. Wow.
Yeah.
And then he died early in the production of AI, because that was supposed to be a Stanley Kubrick film. And then he died and Spielberg took over.
Yeah, I think I think he was a ways into production. I think he, because it took a while to get Eyes Wide Shut kind of out to the theatrical release. He'd been done for a while, if I remember correctly. So I think that he had been working on AI for a good chunk. I also think it was one of those projects, if I remember the lore correctly, that he'd been working on off and on for years and years and years, but was waiting for technology to catch up to the point where he could actually do it.
Interesting.
And he had felt that they had gotten there and was excited to finally be able to move on that project. And then he died.
That actually sounds a lot like what James Cameron says about Avatar. It's kind of the same thing.
Yeah, that he had it and he had to wait till the technology caught up. Well, he didn't even wait. He kind of forced the technology in a lot.
I think he went to Red Camera Systems and actually said, "You need to redesign. Like, I'm going to work with you to build your cameras better so I can make a movie." Yeah, that's pretty ballsy. Yeah, I mean, you're throwing some serious weight around when you can do that.
But at the same time, with the Red Camera Company people, you walk in, you're like, "Oh fuck, the Titanic guy's here."
That's probably true too.
Like
yeah.
I think he had enough fucking cachet at that point that he could have rolled into Panaflex and been like, "So, listen, we're gonna redesign your entire lens and focusing system."
Tarantino did that for The Hateful Eight.
Oh, did he?
Walked in,
really?
Yeah, he walked into Panaflex.
Oh, because it's shot in
it's shot in the Super 80.
Millimeter? Oh, Super 80.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And so they were these super old lenses that they had and that they hadn't been used forever, and they were a copyrighted lens. So no one else could make them, and they kind of fell out of fashion, and they literally hadn't been used for like 40 years. And so Tarantino convinced them to go into the vault and to look at them. And so they brought them out, and most of them were completely toast, but I think they were able to get like 4 or 5 of them refurbished and functional. And so then they let him shoot The Hateful Eight, and then he did a tour and where they showed it in that aspect ratio in theaters.
Wow.
So kind of, kind of super old school. They toured around with the special projector and everything to do it. And apparently when it was announced that he was doing this, everyone and their mother ran to Panavision and got in line to use the lenses. So they're like booked out for like the next like 15 years.
I guarantee you Christopher Nolan was one of the people who was like, I need to get in line for that.
Yeah. So it was a really interesting read. I read a whole article on how these lenses came about, and like how Quentin Tarantino, being the old film buff, was like, I want these, did some research, figured out that there were some, and made it happen.
Well, of course, he loves that. That's his whole thing, right? Is that you said they hadn't been used in like 40 years, and that's the stuff that he basically bases all of his stuff on, is that sort of 70s, late 60s sort of type of filmmaking.
Yep. Yeah. So
Quentin, wonder what he'll do next.
Well, actually, there was some rumor that he might be done, but I don't think that'll happen.
I heard it's one more, and he's done. Like there was a number of films. Like
he's made 9. He says he only wants to make 10. He was just on Bill Maher on HBO
I haven't watched that
4 weeks ago, and Maher was like, "Okay, what's this bullshit you're talking about? You are only going to make one more movie." And he said, "Look, some of these guys in Hollywood, who make these incredible movies, just stick around too long. And then the quality of the films that they put out end up being, by the end, not very good movies." And he just says, "Look, I want to go out, while I still got some juice left in the tank." And he's like, "So I think I got one more in me." And Maher was like, "Well, I think you're wrong." But, there was that rumor that Quentin Tarantino wanted to do a Star Trek movie.
Yeah.
For a while.
That's still out there.
Is it?
Yeah.
That would be a really interesting take on things.
Can you imagine a Quentin Tarantino Star Trek film?
Well, I think he's smart enough to know what he can and can't do in that universe, though. I don't think it would be ultra Tarantino.
Yeah.
I think it would be a different level of intelligence. The dialogue, though, I would be totally down to see what that comes out like.
Oh, that would be...
Live long and prosper, motherfucker.
Yeah, I would just be really curious as to where they
recast Uhuru with Samuel L. Jackson.
I was going to just say, where would Samuel L. Jackson fit in the Star Trek universe?
Well, the rumor is that it's not a mainline Kirk, and it'd be a different crew and a different ship and all that.
Supposedly, it was supposed to just exist in the universe.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
At all, which I would pay to see that, like just to see what Quentin Tarantino would do with a property like that. It'd be interesting. Hell, I'd do that. Give me a Tarantino Star Wars movie. Fuck it, that would be insane.
I'd be down for it. We got a Rodriguez Star Wars episode of
Yes, we did.
I loved it, man. It was so great, and they're going to give him the Book of Fett.
Oh, and it was so clearly Robert Rodriguez too.
Oh,
yes, it was.
Like when you watched
fingerprints were all over it.
It was like El Mandalorian was that episode, dude. Yeah. Straight up.
Since we've now gone into the Star Wars universe, do we want to talk about just Visions real quick?
Actually, yeah. Has everybody watched one of those? We'll close out with that. That's a good.
I have watched the first 2, and that was it.
Yeah, I've watched the first 7.5.
I've watched the first 4. And
So
I think
I want to say two. David, refresh my memory.
2 is
two the
Tatooine
one with
Rhapsody. That's the one with
the band.
the band.
Band and
the whole hut thing.
Oh, okay.
Hut,
All right. So I would say my favorite out of all of them were the brother and sister, which I think is number 3, possibly.
Yeah.
Okay.
The twins.
The twins.
Yeah.
That was my favorite. My favorite. Many of them, like I said earlier, are very Studio Ghibli. There's one where the central character, I swear to you, is an homage to Astro Boy. Do you guys remember like the very old school anime? But they're all good. They're all good in their own right. But like we said, number 1, I think was honestly, I think the
first one was amazing.
It was
the cream of the
It's
crop.
amazing.
Yes.
The art style, the story they told, the way in which they told it. At the end of it, like I want more. Like
I want that.
Season,
There's a season 2 coming. They've already said.
But will it just be more randomness, or will they? Because I would love to see another short in this world.
Probably going to be the same studios telling different stories, or other studios would be my guess.
Yeah.
But there's very little info on it outside of they are doing a second season.
Yeah, that first one was just visually. Forget the fun story that they did.
If Akira Kurosawa had made an anime, that's what episode 1 is. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that was, I think, the thing that struck me so much about that one is that obviously it's animation, but it looked like a black and white film. And when the characters moved, the way the shadow moved and changed with them on their faces,
it's gorgeous.
Mm-hmm.
And they used, it's always a little interesting when you see black and white stuff, and they decide to add just a little splash of color here and there. It was perfect, just the lights here and there, and the blaster bolts and the lightsabers. That was the only thing that were colored in the entire movie, and it worked. It worked perfectly. I could have watched. I could that first one. I could watch a series of just that,
or a movie
easily.
Easily. Yeah. Absolutely.
I loved absolutely everything they did with it. The lightsaber from a scabbard was so cool looking. Like it struck me like I've enjoyed the other ones I've watched. But the twins was good, but it just wasn't my kind of thing or kind of the anime that I liked. But I'm still gonna finish watching them just because of the first one, and they all are. Even if they're not really kind of like your thing, and if anime is not your thing, they're only 15 minutes long.
Yeah,
and they're so well done. Well, the stories are great. They're, again, even if you're not an animation or an anime fan, it's just some great art to sit there and look at for 15 minutes.
I've only seen 2. The second one wasn't great, but it wasn't bad. The only thing I can honestly complain about it is I didn't like the cutesy way in which they drew Boba Fett. For me, Boba Fett, when you make him cutesy, is an entirely useless character.
So that is, I showed some of these to
I've always felt that way about Boba Fett.
And she told me, and my daughter's not into anime, but she told me, oh no, these are all each of these, like you were talking about how they're all very Studio Ghibli at one point. These are all very like studio specific and different styles of anime that are popular right now. Like she compared, I forgot which one it was. I think it was the third or fourth one we were scanning through. She's like, oh, this is like that My Hero Academia show. It's like that. It looks like that. And there was another one that she said, oh yeah, my friend watches this one, and this would what this looks like. So each studio really did put their own stamp and touch and look on all of them. And again, the ones I've looked at so far, still very much a Star Wars universe.
Oh yeah.
Like, now I am kind of bummed, but I understand why, it wouldn't show up and why they wouldn't do it. One of the best Star Wars animated things done yet is that independently done anime that some guy, like a crew guy, worked on for years and years. The
like
TIE
the
Fighter.
YouTube one? Oh, yeah. That's incredible.
I don't think I've seen that.
Oh man, seriously,
it's amazing.
I mean, whatever time it is in your time zone, after we're done, you should look that up.
It's only like 5 minutes. Like, it's not really that long.
What buzzwords should I be typing in?
TIE Fighter anime
type, space battle anime something. Yeah,
it's amazing.
But can I say, just as an addendum to what Pete was saying about the different styles of animation, it's although that was definitely the highlight, I think it's the only representation of the Star Wars universe that we've ever gotten from the viewpoint of a different way of storytelling culturally.
Yeah.
That's the other thing too about it. I mean, the animation certainly stands out because it's a visual medium. That's the way we're seeing what we're seeing. But the pacing is not American.
Nope.
The style of storytelling is not American. The way the characters conduct themselves is not American. And that was, I thought, one of the most fascinating things about it was getting to see, they could have done France or Germany or Spain, and it still would have been like Western culture. But they went like, Eastern culture, which is completely different, absolutely completely different philosophy towards life. And I thought that really showed in the stories that were told.
Yeah, you take the anime out of it, it still has a very Japanese aesthetic to it.
Yeah.
Just the way they told the stories themselves.
And David Harbour voices one of the characters, which I thought was super cool because I like David Harbour a lot.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
All right, we have gotten a really long show on the books.
Yeah, we do.
I think we were going for shorter and have completely missed that mark. And
no, we failed.
We have failed soundly. So it's 2 days later for you guys, I think.
Is it Monday? I'll just stay awake till I have to go to work.
So
it's Christmas here.
I guess we'll do this again sometime soon, and we'll have a new host. I don't know who that's going to be. We're going to figure that out, and it'll be a surprise. So
we'll hire someone.
Well, thanks for having me on, guys.
Oh, Jared,
thanks for letting me be a
thanks
part
for
of
being
it.
here.
Yes, thanks for being here. And for the
it.
listeners, like and subscribe and all of that fun whatever things that people are supposed to do.
Yeah.
All right.
Is that it then?
Well, I'm waiting for you to say something uncomfortable. That's usually how we end it.
Well, no, because you're supposed to say, I mean, Opie always says have a week or something like that.
Oh, man, I don't have a catchphrase. That's my catchphrase right there.
All right, fine.
End of line. How about that? End of line.
And scene.
Fuck it. See y'all bitches later.
There it is.
See, that's what we've been waiting for.
And just as a side note, I know that like Kevin's read Dune, obviously, because I know that from how he's talked about it. And I think Pete.
I read the first one, half of the second one.
Okay.
Yeah, I haven't read the entire.
I've never actually
series.
gotten around to it. It's one of the few that I haven't.
I will totally recommend the first 6 books that Frank Herbert wrote, and none of the other books that his son wrote with Kevin J. Anderson.
That is pretty much what everyone has told me.
And I've heard the same thing, which was kind of disheartening because I love Kevin J. Anderson. Everything he did for the Star Wars expanded universe stuff was awesome.
Yeah, the thing, it's cool to learn about.
Doesn't it all take place like 4,000 years before Dune does?
Well, there are things in the books that are referenced in Frank's series that they then go back and write stories for, like the Butlerian Jihad, when they essentially destroy all AI technology and all thinking machines. It's just that it's written in, they tried to synthesize Frank's style of writing to make the books more palatable, and you can just tell that it's a bad Xerox copy of how Frank wrote,
which is really weird
that way, and it's just tough.
Yeah, that's odd because Kevin Anderson is nothing like Frank Herbert in his prose at all.
No.
And I've read a bunch of his stuff, like I said, because of the Star Wars expanded universe stuff.
Yeah, he wrote like a lot of the Rogue Squadron books.
Exactly, and his style of writing is so different than Frank.
Yeah.
Like Frank Herbert will spend fucking 3 pages describing a scene that some other authors will spend.
Like he'll spend like 3 pages describing sand.
Yeah, but it's beautiful.
Right.
Like
right.
It does, again, and it's why though it's so hard to boil those books down into a good movie, because you've got 7 to 1,000 pages that you're looking at.
Well, the fourth book, the fourth book alone takes place over 3,500 years.
Yeah.